Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for being with us, and welcome to the Advance UK inaugural X Space. Now, some people have questioned the necessity of a new political party. You could be forgiven for thinking that the perceived space that Advance UK has moved into is already overcrowded, with around 19 parties, maybe more, currently vying for attention. Yeah, I've been aware for a very long time in recent political polling history of a really interesting phenomenon. When looking at polling data, the uni party of Labour and Conservatives continue on a terminal decline. The Lib Dem Green hover statically in the same position, give or take a percentage point or two. Reform struggle with breaking that 30% barrier and very recently look to be going ever so slightly back in the polls. Yet the largest and growing voter base is the box you can tick called none of the above. At the last general election, only 52% of the adult population cast a ballot. The none of the above voters, or as Richard Tice once described them, all of that lot, stayed in their front rooms. They didn't leave their homes, politically homeless and possibly also uninspired. In fact, the turnout at the last general election was the lowest since universal suffrage, something we are becoming used to now. If none of the above was a party, it would win by a landslide. So when people talk of splitting the vote or there being no need for a solid party of the people and for the people, ask yourself why the fastest growing voter base in the UK is none of the above. And how do we capture and inspire them, all of that lot? So I'm delighted to be joined this evening by Ben Habib, leader of the newly launched Advance UK, and Jim Ferguson, businessman, entrepreneur and political commentator, who has become the first member of the Advance UK College. Now, I'm sure Ben and Jim would like to open with some thoughts around Advance UK, and then I believe, gentlemen, you are happy to open questions to the floor. So I shall be quiet now, and I look forward to listening to what you have to say this evening. Thank you.
Should I start? Is that a good thing? That was a brilliant exposition, actually. I couldn't have put it better myself. I think people are utterly disillusioned. And ever since 2016, when the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union, when the people of the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union, we've had a political class that frankly stands in opposition to it. And what had been regarded as the mother of all democracies, a sort of bastion of stability and incremental change at the fastest pace that we ever moved, but a model for the world to look at, has become actually mired in either constitutional, economic, cultural, or other crises. And we haven't been able to cope with the people's decision to leave the EU in 2016, effectively because the political class hasn't been prepared to deliver the to deliver on that vote. And we should be very proud of the people of the UK having seen the need to break with this liberal global order, because, we were the first people to see in the world, or in the Western civilization at least, that it was needed, that the supranational order was not working for nation states and so on. And the reason I think none of the above as a political party seemingly is doing so well is because every single political party doesn't represent what the people voted for in 2016. They want to unashamedly take back power from supranational institutions, from international law, from domestic quangos, from the Bank of England, from the Supreme Court, and put it straight back into Parliament and hold the people in Parliament to account. What we've been struggling for is a fundamentally constitutional restoration of the United Kingdom. And the political classes are not prepared to do it. And even though Reform, sorry, forgive me, even though Reform UK held the torch for proud, independent, sovereign, prosperous United Kingdom, in fact, we can see that it's pivoting straight back to just another function of the existing political establishment. And that's why I felt that I felt for many, many months, the opportunity didn't arise, but I felt for many, many months that we needed a new political force in politics, one which actually delivers what the people want, trusts the people, provides them with with leadership in the advancement of our cause, which is the re-establishment effectively of borders, nation state, etc., but isn't governed um, by the political imperative of holding office, holds its principles dearly, is unmoving in its principles, and then gives the people the opportunity to vote for that. And so that's really what Advance UK is all about. And the college, which you kindly mentioned, is merely a number of people who are members of the party, but are not on the shilling of the party. So they're not compromised by the leadership of the executive being induced one way or the other in how they behave, depending on what their own personal aspirations or needs are. And they don't hold public office, so they can't be held. They can't be swayed by the state, as it were. They're there as members and members of our college in order to deliver the political philosophy that I've very, very quickly and broadly outlined, and to hold the executive of the party to account. And it's something that's, I think, obviously lacking in the other political parties, that they don't have what I think Advance UK will have, which is a heart, soul, mind, conscience, um, uh, uh, political, philosophical ballast to deliver what the people essentially voted for in 2016. And we've got processes in place now to look forward to and welcome recommendations from membership to join the college, and it's through the college that we wish to deliver our agenda and change the way politics is done in the United Kingdom. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. Music to my ears, in fact.
And so, I mean, I'm really keen to go to questions. And I know, Jim, you're on, and there are many, many others I can see, very capable speakers and people who hold dearly the same values that I do on here. So I'm very keen to, have them speak and have questions from the floor as much as possible if we can do that.
We most certainly can. So what I would do now then is invite anybody that would like to come up and ask a question of Ben or Jim. And I know there are other members of Advanced UK here this evening. So anybody that wishes to request a mic, please do so. I've got one request at the moment, so I will go straight over to them. Let me just hand them the mic. So that's just connecting now. So Digital, you will have the first question this evening.
I really appreciate you bringing me up, and I have great respect for Ben. I appreciate you standing up and speaking on behalf of the abused girls over and over and over again when nobody else would do it. I really do appreciate that. And yeah, I definitely do have a question though, and I think that it's something that's been lurking on everyone's mind. What would your position be on immigration? Obviously, you were an immigrant yourself, and so it's interesting to me to think about like what your policies would be on bringing people into the UK.
Okay, so Digital, thank you for that question. Bizarrely, people might be surprised to hear that I don't see myself as an immigrant. And maybe, maybe that's a peculiar position for me to take. But my father is Pakistani and Punjabi and Muslim, although a lapsed Muslim. My mother was born in Isleworth, near what was then an RAF base at Heathrow Airport, and her father fought in the Somme. And I come from a family of middle class English people on one side, and from a rather poor Pakistani Punjabi family on the other side. Um, and I was born in 1965 in the post-imperial winds, as I've often said, of British India, which was a fantastic period to be born because there was nothing better, I think, than the legacy of our British imperial past, which is why one of the reasons why I'm so proud of the modern context of what's left of it, and so privileged to have been born into it. But I was brought up being proud of the United Kingdom, even though I was born in Pakistan, and we went to church at Easter and Christmas, and we did all of that. Mum was, she's a staunch Christian, and I've done a little news broadcast with my mum. And so people, if they're really interested in knowing about my background, can tune into my YouTube channel and look at, see the interview with my mum. I came to school in this country in 1979, but I never saw myself as anything other than British. I might have been born in Pakistan, but I'm basically British. And I've been at, and I had the great privilege of being at public school in the United Kingdom. I went to rugby school. I went to Cambridge University. And when I was at rugby school, again, some of you may have heard, I obviously had far too much spare time on my hands because all I did was read Commando mags. And in the Commando mags I read, some of you may be familiar with Commando mags if you're of a certain generation. Basically, it was the Brits who were the good guys and the Germans were the idiots. And I grew up with a diet of pro-British, um, uh, goodness flowing through my veins. And then I absented, well, I was never really ever part of any sort of political engagement. And I had a family and I ran my business. And I only really came round to politics in 2016 when I heard Mark Carney talking nonsense and George Osborne talking nonsense about what would happen to the UK if we voted to leave the EU. And then I've been on a journey of discovery because I've realized that actually, between the time I left school and left school confident that the United Kingdom was a great, fantastic place where everyone believed in it and we were proud of it and we were proud of our history, etc. We've gone from that to a place where most people were in denial of our past and were ashamed of our past and blamed us for the slave trade and all this kind of nonsense. And I've discovered that through the process of peeling back an onion. And so when it comes to immigration, it is utterly clear to me that you cannot preserve that which is British if you have unbridled immigration. Leave aside DEI, leave aside progressive discrimination, the Human Rights Act, all of which have been designed to to hijack what it means to be a British citizen. You simply cannot cope as a country with the rate of demographic change which the United Kingdom has experienced, particularly over the last 5 years, but more extensively over the last 25, 30 years. And Suella Braverman, another immigrant, you might say, was absolutely spot on when she said that we've had more immigrants come to the UK in the last 25 years than in all of history before that. How the hell is the country meant to sustain a settled constitutional and cultural, societal nation sense of being if it is being effectively transformed so radically? And to people who say that it's not about the rate of demographic change that matters, it's the cultural integration that matters, they're two sides of the same coin. You simply cannot sustain the cultural integrity of a country if you change the demography overnight. And it's a kind of it's a sort of intellectual uh, it's fundamentally intellectually flawed, but maybe a sort of university or sixth form kind of attitude that actually all humans are equal. We all deserve an equal shake of the dice, as it were, in life. And so everyone should be welcome to the United Kingdom. And because we're such a fantastic, welcoming, and generous nation, everyone will settle down to our values. The truth is actually quite the opposite. There are lots of cultures, and I brushed up against it, having been born in Pakistan, that are antipathetic to the United Kingdom, that are frankly nowhere near the sophisticated culture that is the UK. And we've got to be very, very conscious of the privilege of our settled culture, our historical settled culture. And we've got to, I don't want to use the word fight because it'll be misinterpreted, but I think people on the chat will know. We've got to fight to preserve it. It cannot be set aside. And in the pursuit of being all things and all generosity and all niceness to all of humanity, what we're effectively doing is setting aside what it means to be British and all the things that gave us the ability to be nice and welcoming and generous and so on. And so, with this massive rate of change in our population, we are setting aside all the things which made us the nation that we were. Now, as far as policies are concerned for immigration, I don't know, Digital, whether you saw my news at Ben last Sunday, but I set out the overarching principles that Advanced UK would adopt, and at the heart of the principles, the approach, is a number of things. So, first and foremost, an advanced UK government on its first day in office would suspend indefinite leave to remain and would suspend the granting of British citizenship. What we've got to do is buy ourselves time to deal with the issues that we're facing as a result of mass migration before we take any further steps. So, we've got to prevent any more people getting the right to remain in the UK until we get a grip of what we're dealing with. Then we've got to repeal on day two, or perhaps later on in day one. We would repeal the Equalities Act and we would repeal the Human Rights Act. The Human Rights Act did perhaps the most damage to our constitutional and cultural setup than any single bit of legislation that's happened in the last 30 years, because it effectively codified what it means to be human and therefore set aside what it means to be a British citizen. It equated all of humanity to being a British citizen. So we would have to repeal those two things. The ECHR, the European Convention of Human Rights, which effectively is the body that's the convention that's been brought into domestic law through the Human Rights Act, has to go. And then and then having done that, what we've got to do is stop the boats in the channel. This is illegal migration. Stop the boats in the channel, reacquaint ourselves with the notion that border enforcement means enforcing the border. It's a physical process, it's doable. It needn't result in any physical violence or any detrimental harm to human, to the people who are trying to get across the border. They simply need to be directed very firmly back to France. The Belgians do it with their boats. That's perfectly doable. And those people who do get to the UK illegally and who have entered the UK illegally are criminals, and they've done it. They're criminals because they've done it illegally, and they should be deported. And if they're coming from countries which don't have a deportation agreement with the United Kingdom, well, then we need to cease trading with those countries if we trade with them, or if we provide them aid, we need to suspend our aid, or if there's other sanctions that we can bring to bear, we bring other sanctions to bear until those countries take those people back. But until such time as they're deported, they're held in secure facilities under guard, not in four-star hotels, receiving benefits, receiving free dental care, free healthcare, free cash in their pockets, all that kind of thing. They are treated as they should be, which is here in the country illegally. So that deals with illegal migration. As far as mass migration is concerned, legal mass migration, we have to set the bar at which the minimum wage that we will accept people into the country at a very high level. I suggested £80,000 per annum, which effectively puts any would-be economic migrant into the top 5% of the earning power of the United Kingdom. Put an extra tax burden on employers who want to bring them in, so that naturally employers are more inclined to employ British people. But then we've also got to re-engineer the way our own labour market works. We've got 7.7 million people out of a workforce of 31 million people surviving on universal credit. We've got to stop benefits being, an option, a career option. So we've got to slash benefits, and there's going to have to be some tough love delivered to the British people. They're going to have welfare removed and benefits removed from them. There are no doubt many people who deserve the protective blanket of the state, but there are many, many more who don't, and they need that blanket removed. And in order to entice them back into the workforce and wean ourselves off cheap imported unskilled labour, we need to also cut taxes on small and medium-sized businesses, sole traders, working class, middle class, the engine of our economic growth, so that if we can reduce benefits, increase what you can make as you earn. You increase the gap between benefits and wages, net wages, effectively, and you entice people back into the workspace. And by the way, that would also be hugely beneficial to our coffers as a country, because instead of taking benefits, people will go back into work and pay tax. So all this debt that we've accumulated over the last 30 years as a nation
Hello,
would
Matt.
slowly be worked
Huh?
away. Sorry, was that too much? I mean, I can go
Who
on
was
and on,
it?
but that's my basic immigration policy.
Sorry, I've been sat in
Um,
it chatting on my phone. Oh,
excuse me, Matt. Can you
that's right,
please
and it's Friday,
turn
wasn't it?
Matt? Can you please turn your
Hello, it's
speaker off?
fucking the sat nav. Yes, apologies.
Thank you.
And perhaps I
Um,
should just finish on one other thing, just very, very quickly, digital, if I may. And it is this, that when I
Right,
grew up,
there you are.
and many who grew up,
I'll look around.
who are my age and grew up with
Beat the
me,
back out now.
I think Matt is still on.
I've just dropped him, Ben.
Yeah,
I'll bring him
well
back
done.
up when
So
he.
the other thing I think is worth mentioning is anyone who's sort of 50 plus will remember that, or perhaps even younger, will remember that, as British citizens, as we're meant to sort of carry our citizenry in our pockets. I was always brought up to believe that we shouldn't be banging the drum. It's not British to be, overtly muscular about who we are, and we just go quietly around our business. And I think we could have um, that privilege, if you like, because we took our nation state for granted. No one ever thought when I was 15 years old that the country itself its existence may be threatened, its constitutional and cultural existence may be threatened. So we were quite happy to have the state and our citizenry and our pride of our country in our pockets. We didn't need to brandish it around because we had supreme self-confidence in it. But I think that things have changed and we are threatened. And I'm afraid that any policy now, in order to settle the British people, will require a much more, obviously on the front foot, muscular form of British identity. And we're going to have to require schools to, sing the national anthem, fly the flag. And the same goes for government institutions. Businesses need to be encouraged to do the same thing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We've got a big mountain to climb, and it involves cutting back mass immigration to, to numbers that we can manage, and only very highly skilled people who actually contribute to the British economy and aren't coming here with antithetical cultures that are antipathetic to ours. Um, and stopping illegal migration, ejecting international law that prevents us from doing what's right, and then having positive steps and positive policies to promote British people in the workforce and promote our Britishness. I think that, yeah, that's pretty comprehensive, I think.
I think that's
Yeah,
really comprehensive. Digital, if it's okay, if that's answered your question, is it okay for you to drop down now as a listener? I've got a massive queue waiting to come up, and Basil, you are next.
I appreciate it. Thank you for letting me have a question.
Hello. Hope you can hear me all right.
I can. Thank you, Basil.
Brilliant. Ben, can I just ask you a question, which is the question I've been asked the most when I've spoken to people about anti-UK is, if you are a member of Reform, or let's say you're actually a branch member of Reform, or even a
Yeah.
branch manager of Reform or something, what is the incentive to jump across to Advance UK? Why would I jump?
Well, I would turn that question around. Why are you part of, presumably, if you're a so-called member of Reform, by the way, they're subscribers, as I think you know, Basil. But I mean, if you're a so-called member of Reform, you're presumably a member because you believe that Reform holds the torch for a proud, independent, sovereign United Kingdom. But why are you holding that? Why are you continuing to hold that torch when its leader says that the rate of demographic change doesn't exercise his concern? That he wouldn't be in favor of deporting all illegal migrants. On the one hand, he says that all foreign criminals should be deported, but all illegal migrants shouldn't be. Someone who basically says he doesn't want to politically alienate Islam, though he accepts that the majority the entire sort of democratic system of the UK is being hijacked by sectarianism. Why would you want to vote for someone or support someone who is promoting Charlie Mullins as a candidate, someone who's an avowed Remainer, part of the supranational international order, someone who is taking on Liberal Democrats into his party, former Labour members, former wet One Nation Tories? I mean, so Farage for me is the ultimate fox. Cunning is hell, but he lacks real depth of thinking. I don't think he's got a political philosophy. I think he's supremely a political expedient. And he goes this way or that way, depending on what he thinks is going to curry favor with the most people that he can curry favor with. But that is the politics of the past. That maybe it may have been a fine political position to take when the UK was effectively, its existence was assured, our economy was fine. But that kind of political expediency has no place in the future. We've got to have not foxes in Parliament. We've got to have, as I've said again in previous interviews, we've got to have lions. We've got to have people who are prepared, who are able to think absolutely of the solutions that are required and prepared and fearlessly express those and have the ability to deliver them. We don't want one really cunning guy, playing this game and that game. We've now got to be led. We've got to have a vision painted for the British people of what's required to be done to save our country. And then we've got to have people who are able to deliver it. And I'm afraid Reform is not doing it. If Reform were doing it, it would have democratized its party, which is why I campaigned for it, because I knew that if the party could be democratized, it didn't matter what Nigel Farage was like. The democracy of the party would make sure it would see itself through to delivering for the British people. But he hasn't done that. It's basically the Yusuf and Farage, circus. And Farage and Reform don't offer they may carry the torch, but it's a false torch they're carrying. They don't offer the solutions. And which is why Advanced UK has been set up, and which is why we have the college, and which is why we are inviting members to put themselves forward for the college. Obviously, there's a process through which people would have to go to get there. But we want the brightest, the most capable, the most fearless people coming forward in Advanced UK to deliver for the country.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Basil. If you don't have any other questions, are you happy to drop down now so I can let some further people up, if that's okay? And Jaglis, your question will be next.
Yes, hello. Thanks very much, Ben, for answering our questions. Ben, I'm curious what kind of approach you might take to canvassing, when it's coming close to the election. Now, given that we all know the media's got a bias, right? And I think the media is going to have a massive problem dealing with the issues of deportations that we are discussing. I think they will see it as too radical. And I think there will be a lot of problems getting media coverage. So how do you think, have you thought much about what the best approach to canvassing will be? The traditional method, chapping doors and leaflets and things? Or would you consider doing more kind of street level activism in terms of perhaps addressing rallies and things, which would give you a broader reach to people, because you might be restricted by the traditional methods of media coverage. And so I'm just curious about if you had any thoughts on your approach to canvassing, Ben. Thank you.
That's a really important question, because ultimately it's all about being able to get the message across to the British people. And I think before we get to 2029 or the run up to the election in 2029, what we've absolutely crucially got to do is get the message across that broadly I've been outlining at the moment, which is that, the threat the country faces and the solutions that are required to deliver us from the precipice of disaster. And so my efforts, the party's efforts, our collective effort between now and 2028, at least, has got to be on getting that message established. I'm less interested right now on the electoral strategy and tactics of 2029 than I am of delivering the message and moving the Overton window, making sure that people can see clearly the reasons why we advocate what we advocate. You know, I don't want division in society. I don't want to be divisive for the sake of it. I don't want to take the route of maximum resistance. I just want to highlight the issues, show where the root causes of those issues are, and promote the solutions of them between now and 2028. When we get to 2028, then we will see. I mean, I'm hoping by the time we get there, the message has dropped, and that people, and that we're polling well, that we've become a completely registered and fully fledged political party, that we're polling well, and actually then the mainstream media and the rest of them, they can't ignore us because, you know, we're doing well in the polls. And then we will form our electoral strategy and precisely how we play the ground game. But the ground game, undoubtedly, Jaglas, is critical. You know, I've experienced two defeats. At least one of them was a victory because it put reform on the map. It was the by-election in Wellingborough that I fought because it took us 3% above our national polling average at the time. But I know how important the ground game is. And the ground game will defeat all social media and all mainstream media if it's done well. But we're way off from that at the moment. And I think the critical stage we're at right now is simply getting the arguments across. The Conservative Party is not making the arguments. It's completely lost its roots with its conservatism and its unionist DNA. Reform is a political expedient, as I mentioned, it flip flops this way and that way. And frankly, there is no other party that stands for the nation state, freedom of speech, democracy, and equality before the law. And we just need to keep making those arguments before 2028. And then we'll just see what the polls look like, how we're doing, and we can form our strategy at that point.
Thank you. Thank you.
Super. Jaglas, if that answers your question, and Truth, could you pop your mic off because we?
Oh, sorry, I didn't even realise it was open.
Yeah, we could hear you.
No, that was better. You could hear.
So up next I have Britman Dan. Could I just ask one question? UK PLC, you asked for the mic. Did you want to actually ask a question? Because I'll get you in line to ask a question. Just put a thumb up if that's the case, or give me a shout out and let me know.
Yes, please, that's fine.
Super. Okay, thank you so much. So next it will be Britman Dan.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, so I believe Advance UK are at a time of great opportunity where there is such party disconnect and party bureaucracy that I think that we live in an era where there's such opportunity for a new age of interactive parties. And I'm curious if Advance UK would be interested in looking at the possibility of enabling members to have interactive polls in an app or something to try and enable Advance UK to offer something that no political party in the UK and probably even the entire West offers at this stage. And maybe with allies like Musk, maybe there's a possibility of connecting with folks like that to help an initiative like this that could demonstrate a party that Advance UK are a party of democracy rather than just being a plain old bureaucratic party like all the rest of them have become at this stage. I'd personally be more than happy to, help to provide some assistance when it comes to development of this. But I think that the time is now for something like this. And I think Advance UK would be the perfect party to introduce it. And I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on that, Ben.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree that you cannot campaign for democracy and at the same time ignore in a party what your membership want. If you're an advocate of democracy, you have to be an advocate of what your members want. So what I've tried to create, or what we've tried to create in Advance UK, is a mirror image of the British constitutional setup. So the members represent the electorate, the college represents Parliament, and the members elect our college, and the college then hold the executive, who are like the government, to account. So I've tried to mirror the entire British constitutional system in the Constitution of Advance UK. And anyway, we'll see how that works. But I think that is unique in British politics. I do completely agree that we need an app. And we're only a week out of the stalls, but it's been on my mind that we do need an app. and we need an interactive way of communicating with our members. Some of that will be traditionally through associations or branches, whatever you'd like to call them, which will be set up in due course. But I think we do need a mechanism by which people, one of the great things about GB News, people might have their views on GB News, but one of the great things I think about GB News is the way it reads out emails and texts and so on that are coming in while you're on the show. And we need an ability for people to communicate with us, with the party as they have thoughts. And I think an app is a brilliant way forward. The other thing that we're looking at, I mean, it's all very early days because, as I say, we're only a week out of the stalls, but is AI, and see how AI can help us effectively communicate and understand what it is that our members and others want. So we can expedite the production of policy, etc. But I also want to say that I think that we do need to set out as a leadership, as a party, we need to set out our vision. What is our mission statement? And cast our policies round that mission statement. We've got to also be true to our political philosophy. So whilst there may be members who have lots of different views, we do need to also try and sell, for want of a better word, sell our mission statement and sell and lead. We've got to lead. I think a lot of political parties don't lead. Part of Boris Johnson's problem was that he wanted to be popular with everyone all the time. And you end up just making nonsense policies. So I think, it's a balance. But I completely take on your point. And an app is something that I will be speaking to, our little executive team, which is now growing, about creating as soon as possible.
Lovely. Did that answer your question, Brittman, Dan? Yeah.
I think so. Within reason, I'd be more than excited to see the opportunity to go and have polls if there's disagreements on economics amongst the members, rather than just seeing everybody disperse the party over one disagreement. That everybody can put their views forward and say why they take a certain position, and then maybe the party could actually go and do more to align with its voter base, rather than doing what Farage is doing and just run away from them.
Yeah, I mean, Farage is all over the place. 1 minute he talks about supply side reform, and the next minute he's talking about taking 250,000 quid off rich people and distributing it to the poorest in society. He talks about the need to cut back the welfare state, but he wants to take off the cap on two-child benefit. I mean, he's all over the place. And I think what you will get from Advance UK is a coherent um, set of policies. But I completely agree with you. It's an iterative process the way I see it. You have the leadership, you set out the mission, you set out the vision, policies are proposed either by members or by a collective committee between the college and the executive, and they're bounced around, and you end up with the right solution. Now, there will be policies with which not everyone will agree, but I think taken in the round, the policies need to hit the mission statement for the party. And, let's not underestimate the task ahead of the United Kingdom. The task ahead is vast. We've got to we've got to we've got to really reset 30 years of political dogma, and we've got to take our constitution back to a position where it actually represents the United Kingdom rather than the supranational liberal elitist global order. And that task, just that one task, is going to be mammoth. When it comes to trying to simply revoke the Human Rights Act, the opposition is going to be massive. And in that one act, we will change the way the United Kingdom is governed overnight. The other thing that we would do, and I know some people here will regard it as a minority sport, but if we were to revoke and repudiate the Northern Ireland Protocol, we would effectively remove the IRC border, take Northern Ireland back into the United Kingdom, and put two fingers up to the EU. That too will be a massive event, as small as it might seem. Just these steps on their own are going to set shockwaves across the international community. And those are shockwaves we need to set going. And we need to be able then to manage the position that comes out of it. So we are, you know, the overall thrust. If we can achieve like 3 or 4 things, frankly, in the way that I've just described, we will change the entire way the United Kingdom is governed.
Fantastic, Ben. Thank you so much. Could I ask Jim a question before we move on to Julia next?
Yes, of course.
Jim, what's made you get so involved with Advance? What have you seen in this potential political party as being something that we don't have currently available to us?
Well, I think it's uniqueness. I mean, first of all, we stand as a nation at a crossroads. Our country is being dismantled piece by piece by weak leaders, foreign agendas, and hostile ideologies. The British people are being lied to, they're being taxed into poverty, censored for speaking truth, and told to be ashamed of the nation their ancestors built. What we're seeing in Advance UK is no more. Advance UK is not just another party, we are the line in the sand. And their mission is to reclaim Britain from the grip of globalism, to restore national pride, to defend our sovereignty, and to build a prosperous, self-reliant future for every member of the United Kingdom. And the vision that is being put forward by Ben Habib as our leader of Advance UK is that we need a strong vision, a sovereign and a safe Britain. Sovereignty first, because Britain should be ruling Britain. We need to exit all globalist treaties that override Parliament, including the World Health Organization Pandemic Treaty. In my opinion, we need to withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights, replace it with a British Bill of Rights, end binding net zero treaties that punish families and businesses. And the key line will never again will foreign laws dictate the fate of the British people. And, I'm very proud because when I was in the Brexit Party, I knew Ben Habib there. He was one of the leading lights there. And I was very pleased to see him join Reform. Not that I was ever a member of it, but I was pleased to see him join it as deputy leader because I believed that he would use his talents, his intelligence, his charisma to enact the changes that Reform needed, because Reform is top down. And the members of Reform are not drivers, they're passengers. They cannot change anything. And what Ben has done with the college, the Advanced UK College, is totally, completely unique. And I'm very proud to have been taken in. I've passed all the tests. And of course, part of the college will be to help to formulate policy, to suggest new things going forward for consideration by the executive. But yes, I think that first of all, one of the things that we must be looking at doing, apart from the obvious, which is to immediately halt all further mass illegal immigration. That is first and foremost. For example, when I was in Washington, D.C. the last time, I interviewed Senator Ron Johnson just before Trump got re-elected. And I asked him the question, when Trump gets in as president again, what will be the first thing that you would like to see? And he immediately said, seal the border. And he said all the problems that are, plaguing the country are a lot of them are coming from that. So, but we also need to think about reviving the economy. We want a fair tax, strong industry. I would suggest zero tax for British small businesses under 250,000 revenue a year. Now, these are just my ideas, but I would be putting them to the college members for consideration by Ben and others. A digital tax, for example, on big tech siphoning billions offshore, and a clampdown on elite tax dodgers and foreign profiteers. I think we also need to look at possibly launching a national reindustrialization plan to rebuild things like British steel, shipbuilding, auto industries, and taxing the global exploiters, but not the workers. If you think about the problems that people are facing in this country, especially young people getting their first foot on the rung of the ladder for the housing market. We need to freeze all social housing allocation for illegal migrants. They are here illegally. New housing priority for veterans, young families and key workers needs to be brought in. And we must ban foreign corporations from buying British homes in bulk. In other words, no migrant should skip the queue while a British veteran sleeps on the streets. And I come from a long line of military service and I care passionately about our British forces. I would even go as far as to say as defence and civil protection. Rebuilding the British Armed Forces, restoring strength and morale, not having them paraded around the streets carrying trans flags. That's just ridiculous. And we need to exit foreign entanglements that don't serve the national interests. We have no business being in Ukraine, and that's my own personal opinion. We might even think about a UK civil defence force, using veterans to secure communities and protect against digital warfare, psychological operations, and foreign ideological subversion. We need to defend our borders, our streets, and our minds. And we need to think about healthcare. We need to think about education. Anybody that watches my channel or knows anything about me knows that I want to see an audit of vaccine contracts and injuries. I noted with interest that that's being now looked at by Restore as the movement that it is. But we also need to look at the NHS, the depoliticisation, and focus on patient care. Ban outsourcing from NHS data to foreign companies, and the restoration of open medical debate and science. I think that these are things that Advance UK are offering. And the other thing that I think, and I go back to, I think it was Basil's point earlier on, it was a very good question. You know, what is the difference? Well, there is a big difference if you look at it, because Reform UK are leader-centric. Nigel Farage is Reform, and Reform is Nigel Farage. Whereas with Advance UK, we're talking about being grassroots-led. I mean, Reform uses broad slogans. We are proposing detailed policies. And those policies are going to become more evident as time goes on. As Ben has said, we're just out the stalls. So, for example, Reform UK, well, there was no action on jab injuries. They didn't want to talk about it. Whereas Advance UK are looking for full accountability. And in terms of being top down, well, that's what Reform is. Advance UK are looking at participatory college models. And as I say, I'm delighted to be in there. Reform also look on the image. We want to focus on the mission and the justice. And I think Ben can confirm this, but I think he's the only one, the only national leader, the only political party leader who has actually pledged £100,000 of his own money once the 30,000 members join. And that's what I call real leadership. It's not politics as usual. And I think the other question that I think it might have been Britannia, if I remember right, talked about was direct democracy. Ben's looking at an app. I think that's an amazing way to gauge public participation and their own ideas. And I think people want to be part of this. And I think that's what Advance UK is all about. We're about listening to the members. So I think that we need to look at what we're doing. There's going to be a lot of policies coming out. But essentially, it's Britain first, British families first, British futures first. And I would highly recommend everybody who's come in here tonight to join Advance UK, become part of the change that Britain needs. And before I hand it back, let me just say to everybody that's gathered in here tonight, go into your feeds and repost this space right now, because there's hundreds of people in here, but we will reach thousands of people if you just go into your feed and repost this space out. But yeah, I'm very proud to be standing with Ben Habib in this as a member of the party, as a member of the college, and I'll support him and I'll support the party until the next general election happens, and then we'll see what happens after that. But the time has come, the time has really come, and there is now a viable option apart from Reform. Reform's not going to do it, in my opinion, but I think Advance UK under Ben Habib certainly will, and I'm very proud and honoured to be here. Thank you.
Jim, thank you so very much. That was really inspirational to listen to, so thank you. Julia, thank you for your patience. Your question is next.
Thank you so much. I never thought I'd be able to speak to Ben Habib. I've listened to him so often and for so long. So thank you so much. And thanks, Jim and everybody. Good to meet you, Ben. Today is the 5th anniversary of my 19-year-old autistic son's death under the NHS. The coroner said that I fought ferociously for his life, and I did. The machine was too powerful. Laws meant to protect us go unenforced, and backs are turned. We've left the UK in March, sold everything off at a loss, gave everything away, and we live abroad too scared to return. Because people like us are not properly supported and can't access basic services. And I have 2 other autistic children. It felt very much as if we were expected to pay for everything. Well, we are placed at risk and we die. A week before I left, I had a council tax bill for 3.5 grand, and it felt really great being able to leave the country and not pay it and fund people who seem to hate us. But there is a massive silence. I never would have believed that any of this could happen. So many agencies now are utterly corrupt. I've seen it all. There are no specialised services for us. we had to fight and we had to win our own statutory public inquiry. It's called the Lampard Inquiry. It's ongoing right now, but it gets virtually no media, which is quite frightening. It covers significantly more than 2,000 Essex mental health deaths, but it's barely mentioned. It's the tip of a vast national iceberg. Resources just aren't going towards people like us, and we die. So, people like me find ourselves totally politically homeless. Our country has become unrecognisable and unsafe. I joined Reform, but I never got anywhere near our issues. I really tried. I went to rallies. I even went to the Christmas party. So my question to you would be: I've heard your intentions, and we know timeframes are so tight. When and how will we ever include families like mine? Parents of young children forced into failing education systems, mental health systems, the NHS. There are so many English people where I am now. They've all recently left. I'm so concerned for others like us who feel disposable in the country we left, to the degree that we ran to the ends of the earth for our safety, but our hearts are still there. So thanks, Ben. It's a big job, but do let us know what your ideas are. And if I could ever engage with any of you, I would. I qualified as a lawyer and I have advocated for years. To no avail. Thanks.
So, thank you, Julia. I'm very sorry to hear the experiences to which you've been subjected. Can I just ask, you've left the UK, you said, is what I'm gleaning, and can I ask where you are, if
Yes.
that's not an impertinent question?
Portugal. We're in Portugal. And it was important to me because I had lost my brother at the age of 19. We're now learning that many people who suffer with mental illness are actually autistic and simply need the right support at the right time and a bit of understanding. So I'm really concerned that there's a lot going on in Sen at the moment, and children are going to lose the legal right, which is largely unenforceable anyway, to the support they need, which might save their lives. And they may end up like Elon if we prioritize them. However, we're not doing that. So many people are in Portugal. Yes. It's like being in England with sun. We're like asylum seekers. We've just all so many of us have left. Yeah, more English people are here than anything. I barely hear a Portuguese voice. Yeah, and it was important because my other two boys were both systemically failed. I got a whole raft of court rulings, coroner's rulings, PHSO, LGO, but really it's meaningless and it doesn't guarantee any future safety at all. Quite the opposite. So yeah.
So, I mean, I'm very sorry, as I say, to hear about that. And I'm not surprised by Portugal. I've heard many, many British people say to me that, they've got friends in Portugal or they're thinking of Portugal. And of course, it's one of our oldest allies, isn't it, in the world? So I think we have something in common with Portugal. But just
It is,
coming,
Ben. Yeah, it also means that when I die, Ben, having had my son ripped away from me, literally, and killed systemically, when I die, I will be able to leave 100% of what I have to my surviving children. And it will not be purloined
by
and
the state.
wasted. Yes, I wouldn't mind. There are so many English people here who they feel so bad because they're more than happy to pay taxes, more than happy to pay their share, but the resources that they provide and have worked so hard for need to be deployed in the most appropriate ways, and that doesn't make us hate anybody or be racists. We would
No.
simply like the luxury of not having our children killed. That is a luxury we now consider to be a luxury. And our loved ones are at risk not receiving proper care. And our services have declined to dangerous and lethal levels. We must act. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I completely agree with your diagnosis. We've ceased to look after our own. And I think I think the heart of that is, without wishing to labor the point too much, but I think it is important, is the Human Rights Act. The Human Rights Act effectively set aside what it meant to be a British citizen. It codified what humanity means when we didn't need it codified because we perfectly well understood in the United Kingdom what humanity is through the body of law and regulations that we had that had evolved and settled into place over hundreds of years. But it turned it on its head. It codified what it means to be human, and it set aside at the same time what it means to be British. And it's from that point onwards that the government, our institutions, and our services, etc., ceased to put British people first, and they started putting everyone initially equally, and then of course then we get the Equalities Act with progressive discrimination coming in, and effectively British citizens, veterans, as Jim so brilliantly articulated, being their interests being set aside in the interests of others, and if you then couple that with mass migration, so progressive discrimination, a lack of recognition of what family means because we forget the British citizenry family, that the British citizen family that we are,
Yeah.
society, of forgetting our society. You couple that with mass immigration and discrimination in favor of the immigrants, you've actually destroyed what it means to be British and the protections that the United Kingdom offers British people, and which traditionally we could all take for granted. We when I was a child, I was evacuated from Pakistan in 1971 during a war
Yeah.
between Pakistan and India, and it took the British Embassy all of 5 days, I think, to get a Hercules sent out to Karachi airport, and all British citizens put on a plane, including my mum and my two siblings. My father was left behind because he was running a pharmaceutical business. Um, but we looked after our own, and we don't look after our own anymore. We've set aside what it means to be a nation state, and we've forgotten what it means to be a society. Multiculturalism is basically the breaking of our society, and if we forget what it is to be a society, and by the way, the family unit was one of the first things to go. We've had the increasing interference in family by the state. I was
Yeah.
I'm slightly digressing, but it's absolutely on point. Jeremy Hunt making a big thing in his first budget as Chancellor that he was going to extend the child benefit, the child care down to children who are 9 months old. Well, I would say no child who is 9 months old should be separated from their parents. At least one parent, and I personally think mother, should be with their 9-month-old child, and
It's
they should not.
unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah, they
So
shouldn't be
obvious,
paid.
isn't it, Ben?
It's so
Yeah.
obvious. You should not be paying people money to strip them of their children. But that is progressively what the state has done. We've lost connection between family, society, and nation state, and it's all one thing. A society requires families, and a nation state requires a settled society. But you can't be a society with a unified, homogeneous, broadly settled culture if you're practicing mass migration and multiculturalism. Actually, what you've got is division in society. And so we have forgotten our own. And I'm not surprised that you find more commonality in Portugal than you do in the UK. I mean, it's a lot of people have said that to me, and I'm very, very sorry about it. But that's the challenge we're facing. It's the uphill struggle to effectively redefine the nation state of the United Kingdom and what it means to be a British citizen. That's fundamentally what we're fighting for. And
Yeah.
that's what the vote to leave the EU was in 2016. And if the bloody political class had actually done what the people had directed them to do, we wouldn't have made so many mistakes that we've made since then.
No, I agree. And what I find so frightening is we have a statutory inquiry, and a small group of us fought like animals for it. Um, it was a huge job to get it, and we thought we were home and dry, but actually, um, it's not just our government, it is the way that the media isn't covering this. We thought we'd be home and dry, it would be like the post office inquiry, everybody would know our stories, and we would be able to make change. But in actual fact, I feel as if really there was no point fighting for it because it gets no oxygen, it gets no media
Yeah.
coverage. Yeah, we have no leverage. So the power of the state in terms of itself and in terms of its media and its connection to the media is really troubling, because if something is not something you want to broadcast, it's going to be buried and it's going to be hidden. You know, we have significantly more than 2,000 deaths in Essex alone, and that's only mostly for inpatient, likely preventable
Yeah.
inpatient deaths. That doesn't speak to the community, where there are so many more deaths, all preventable, all coming about as the result of the very harsh way that our young people now live. Our children, they go to these what hit Christopher, no, is it Christopher Dan, is it Dan Hitchens, I've got his name, he called them day orphanages, where young babies are handed over while their parents go to work and and are miserable at work. Then they go to schools that are not the happy places that I remember, and
No,
it
it's a
is all
breakdown
very
in
sad.
society. We're
It's
seeing a
desperately
breakdown in
sad.
society.
Yeah, even
And
dyslexic children don't even get dyslexia assessments or
yeah.
support. I
And
have parents
if you
contacting me saying, my son is 16, he leaves school in May, he can't read or write. What should I do?
yeah, yeah. No,
Julia
it's
and
awful.
Ben, we've
Yeah.
got quite a long list of
Okay, I
people
just want to
waiting.
Sorry,
quickly
Julia,
just say
thank you.
um,
I just want to say one last thing. Inquiries, I think, are a really convenient way of the state sidestepping its obligations. Every time we've
Yeah,
had a really significant geopolitical or domestic issue, like the gang rapes, for example, we set up an inquiry and it never yields a result. With the gang rapes, I'm not in favor of an inquiry. I want a special branch of the police force to be set up, one that's not compromised. And I want people to be investigated and charges brought. I've had enough of inquiries. They never
yeah.
lead anywhere. We've got to actually hold people to account.
Yeah, and I know that there is a pipeline where children with special educational needs are falling out of school because they're not getting support. They're at home rotting. They're registered as being electively home educated, but they're rotting physically and
Yeah,
mentally, not receiving anything. And there are a large number of them, but they don't seem to matter. There's so much we need to address, so much
yeah,
that's hidden. We
yeah.
haven't even openly identified. And I'm so keen to see that happen.
Julia, thank you so much. Are
Thanks.
you happy now to drop down, because I do have quite
Sure.
a vast queue
Just
of
thank
people,
you
but
so
thank you
much,
so much.
everybody, for giving me a chance to speak to Ben. It's so hard to get to speak to anybody, and that was quite amazing. Thank you.
Oh, you are very, very welcome. Thank you so much for your contribution. So next I have Wes. So thank you so much for your patience. You're next for your question.
Yeah, thanks, thanks, host. Thanks for bringing me up. And yeah, first of all, good evening, Ben. First of all, I'd just like to commend you for your public service and your sincere desire to give a voice to the voiceless, and the politically homeless. Now, my question is this: what is there any updates on this 30,000 membership target? First of all, and secondly, do you think you might not have missed a trick by providing regular updates, whether weekly or daily, just to build some kind of momentum and buzz, just to see people signing up and to try and encourage others to jump on board? So I'll hand it over to you, Ben. Thanks very much.
Yeah, so we have got over 10,000 members, donors, and supporters so far. We've raised, last time I looked, and I do look quite frequently because it's an interesting metric for whether or not we're getting through. We've raised over £108,000 since last Monday, so 8 days ago. It's put us in the top 10 of the political parties in the United Kingdom, basically in a week. It says to me that actually there's a lot of support for a serious, principled, pro-British party that is prepared to, stand its ground and stand for the people. And I'm very, very encouraged by it. I'm reluctant, if you don't mind me saying so, to give a day-by-day account of how our membership is doing. I suspect our membership the growth in our membership is going to go in leaps and bounds. So there'll be periods when it won't grow that quickly, and then there'll be an event like Farage opens his mouth, and we'll get a lot of people joining Advance UK, or there's something positive that will happen and a lot of people will join Advance UK. But s- some of the messages coming back to me, and I'm very cognizant of what people are saying, and I want to respond to it, is that don't wait for 30,000, just get on and apply to the Electoral Commission. Don't waste. Why are you trying to set this level of 30,000? The reason I've set the 30,000 target is because that was the number of members Reform had when I was deputy leader just before the general election. And, we won seats with that level of membership. So I thought that was an appropriate level to get to before we really get stuck into electoral politics. But while I've got everyone on, can I just do a quick show of hands? If you think we should go for electoral commission registration before we get to 30,000, please put your thumbs up. Are you able to do that? I just want to see how many thumbs go up. Just get on with it. Yeah, that's quite a lot of thumbs, hearts, some hearts too. So that's a pretty convicted, that you've got conviction there. Can I ask you to just do it once more? I just want to scroll down and have a look. It's for my own. Yeah, everyone wants me to just get on with it. So I mean, it might be that we waive that 30,000 target and just, we've got more than adequate capital, and I'm more than happy to donate the 100,000 that I said I would donate when we get to 30,000. Donate it now and get on with it. I wanted to get to 30,000 just so that we are absolutely got a line in the sand and people know, we're a fighting force. But anyway, so, that was the thinking behind it.
That's super. Weza, thank you so much for that question. If you're happy that that's been answered, are you okay to drop down and I can bring some more people back up? So just to give a running order, because I know a lot of people have been waiting a long time. It's UK PLC next, then we'll go to Boudica and then to Truth. So UK PLC, your question.
Hi, thanks, Ben. It's delightful to meet you. I met you a couple of times, and I think your integrity, your clarity on the Constitution as being the sort of backbone of the party is absolutely not in question and very impressive. I think the challenge is, though, it's about how do we create the most exceptional capability to actually create a party which uniquely does what it says, because that's really been the gap, historically over the last goodness knows how long in UK politics. I'm just interested, to know how you see the organisation, the governance in the party, given the fact that Rupert has done his own thing with the Restore Britain. There's the GB PAC, there's yourself, there's the team. And how do you see the advanced party developing its capability and the team to actually genuinely hit the ground running? And also, given the fact that delightful woman spoke earlier, that there's a real sense of urgency here, because I came into politics primarily because, well, sort of into politics, or showed an active interest in politics, because I've noticed as a company turnaround expert that the psychology at company level has gone to national level. The corrupt psychology, it's now gone to supranational level, and I've got a unique insight into the psychology and how things get corrupted, which is the reason why what people say and what people do is two different things. So I'm just really interested to know what your plan is to create a really exceptional team, and practically as well, if you don't stay ahead of this challenge, because the challenge for leadership is when things get tough, not on a sunny day. And there's a lot of difficulty that people have around openly talking about Islam, or and I think the Tommy Robinson test is an interesting one. Just not that he's right or wrong, but just to see if people can actually cope with that type of discussion. And that's just the discussion. But when you look at the challenge ahead, which includes removing a huge amount of migrants, I've looked at that and I've sent you a sort of a business plan to try and detail these projects, let's say, which includes sorting out London, removing migrants. And just removing migrants, I think, costs 40 billion quid and will probably take 175,000 soldiers, for example. So I think
But
there's
that's
a
very
distinct
cheap at the price, by the way.
yeah. So I'm just really interested to know, and I think there's certain things we can do as a political entity, but I think there's a lot more, and I think as well we need to resource this in quite a different way. I use the word provocatively, sort of a guerrilla team to deliver results, which is more the sort of Dominic Cummings, Ant Middleton type people rather than your typical political people who are actually going to deliver the results. Because if you're not careful, the fantastic oratory, if it's not matched with delivering results, and I think from pretty much immediately, then the gap will widen and it becomes increasingly difficult to close.
So this is
Just
why, yeah. So this is why I think the college is so important. The college will comprise up to 100 people in the party. They come from the membership, and as I say, they'll be the hearts, ears, eyes, conscience, um, intellectual ballast, and the body which will keep the executive in check, make sure the executive actually delivers what it's saying it's going to do. The college will not be paid. They will not be members of any, they can't be members of parliament or member of a council or anything like that. So they're completely removed from being hijacked by the patronage of power. They're removed from that. They're in it because they care for the country and they're capable people, and they will not come up for election rapidly. They will come up, only a tenth of the college comes up for election every year, so that it would take 10 years to replace the college in its entirety. And so the political philosophy of the party can't be hijacked. And you've got these people who are in it, holding the executive to account on the salient issues that matter. And so I think the college is a really important part of the political party that we set up, and it'll keep the party true. Um, but I do think that if we want to really deliver for the country, this can't be about razzmatazz and just table thumping speeches and lots of fireworks going off and making people feel good about themselves and sending them off home thinking, right, the problem's solved simply because we said we were going to solve the problem. I think it really genuinely is about being able to create a dozen, it's only a dozen or 20 members of a future cabinet who are capable around all the issues, perhaps expert in some, but capable around all the issues, and will deliver the solutions and have the wherewithal to enact those solutions. And that's what it is. And the other reason I want a college, by the way, is because we have to combat. I'm going to use this term carefully because I'm actually a populist at heart. But the way populism has been delivered is through table thumping speeches, many of which don't result in any real action. And I'm all for making table thumping speeches. I do it all the time in a sense. But it's got to be backed up with serious policy and serious thinking. And what I really think is undermining politics across Europe at the moment is lots of table thumping, but not much serious thinking going on behind it. And I want Advance UK to break that mold, to make the cases, make the arguments boldly, and thump the table, but back it up with serious capability to deliver. That's fundamental because if you can't deliver, there's no point getting office. And so yeah, so that's basically the approach.
Yeah, thanks. I think if I may respond, I think there's a underestimation of the psychological challenge and the level of indoctrination, both in terms of the electorate, Parliament in particular. Lots of notable examples of that, and the deterioration of ethics, the importance of Christianity, these sorts of things, as
Yeah.
getting the country back to on a level keel, because you've actually got to bring along. And also, I think you can see in the States, you can't afford to leave the left behind, because I was thinking in a company turnaround context, the way I do it is effectively to set the strategy, get results straight away, engage the team, and then the left type people who tend to be the followers rather than leaders, and they only become a pain in the backside if you just leave them to do their own thing. But you've got to bring those people along. But
So I think the electorate are fine. I think the electorate see exactly what's needed. And I don't see the so-called left. I don't know what you mean by left exactly, UK PLC, but the left.
What I mean by exactly the same as you, the sort of anti-national type.
Yeah, well, I don't want to bring them along. I don't really care what
Well, they're
that lot.
50%. They're 50% of large psychologically. They're 50% of the
Yeah,
population, which broadly fall into that category. They're
but
large.
17, so 16.2 million or whatever it was voted to remain. But they're not necessarily anti-nation, that lot. Um, the people who voted to remain because it was the status quo. Actually, I think the values we stand for and what the United Kingdom and the electorate want are pretty much aligned. And it's the political class who are the difficulties, the lanyard class, the bureaucrats, the quangos, the NGOs, the supranational institutions. They're the ones who are standing against it. The true lefties are basically allies, because the true lefties, if you want to call them that, the old traditional Labour, want to promote the working class, want to promote state interference by the United Kingdom state in the promotion of the working class. They want to get rid of the EU, get rid of controls on state aid, etc. So I don't see it. I see this as really the establishment versus the people. A lot of people voted Remain because the establishment was thumping the table for Remain. Maybe you think that's naive.
I think the naivety is really that I think it's around our psychology drives everything that we do, and very few people actually understand their psychology. And that's the challenge that we face. And I think unless we hit that nail on the head, we're going to spend an awful long time, and we could fall into the same trap of not being able to deliver
Yeah.
results.
But I think the two-party system's broken. I think that people are prepared to vote for new parties. I think there's every chance of, as far off as it might seem, there's every chance Advance UK could be in some form of government by 2029. And I think if we get our agenda right, if we get our thought processes straight, our policies correct, and we have the fortitude and the capability to deliver it, I think we can do it. I also don't like, if you don't mind me saying, I don't like the narrative that the bureaucrats are going to defeat us, that we're not going to make this, that the blob is going to. I don't buy that. I've run a business now. I've been in private business since 1994, and as a small business, and I've been up against Goliath. I've been up against some of the biggest pension schemes in the country, and I can see my son is listening to this. I can see my son is listening to this chat, and he will know that I have been up against really very significant competitors, and I have beaten them, and not because I've beaten them through being particularly smart or clever. It's just having right on my side, standing my ground, and not giving in. And I think if we do that, we will prevail. We've got to have the right ideas. We've got to have the right people. We've got to be brave, and we will do it.
Yeah, I'm not massively disagreeing with you, but I think if you want to do that fast, I've turned business around in 2 weeks, and like you, I win 4 or 5 awards a year against the big four, and I run a one-man band. So I totally agree with punching above your weight. It just could be a hell of a lot easier, Ben. That's what I'm saying. I'd like to
Yeah.
discuss this offline
Yeah,
with you.
well, I'd love to discuss it, and let's discuss it. But
Yeah,
I travel in hope.
Ben, you have my full. I was just saying, you have my full support. I'm
Thank you.
sharing this as a token of my love and support of this whole thing. So
No,
I'm
well,
not.
thank you. No, absolutely. No, I mean, I don't. Totally valid. Absolutely, thank you.
UK PLC, thank you so very much. That was a really interesting contribution. Are you happy to drop down now, which allows me to
If I
bring
can find out how to do that, yeah.
drop to listen. If not, I can drop you.
Yeah, just drop me down, yeah.
I will indeed. Boudica, you are next. Then it will be Truth, and then Mila. Thank you.
Thank you, and hi, Ben.
Hi.
Hi. Right, I'd like to hear what your or the party's view is of our criminal justice system, and if you feel that changes are needed, and if so, how radically you think those changes need to be. Because I believe that a country's criminal justice system and the way it operates reflects the moral compass, basically, of the country, and the way that certain crimes are dealt with the way that the sentences that the offenders receive. It reinforces to society what's acceptable, what's normal. And our politicians, time and time again, they tend to sporadically acknowledge failings individually, whether it's in policing or the CPS or the courts, and they never address it as an entire system. Now, the Boudicca's team, we've spent a lot of time looking into the police charge rates, the Crown Prosecution Service prosecution rates, and the conviction rates for child sexual abuse offences. And the government's own stats have shown that since 2019, the highest charge rates for CSA offences by the police to the CPS is 12%. The highest prosecution rates by the CPS is 9%. And the highest conviction rate has been about 7%. And this is the best that our criminal justice system, as an entire system, has been able to manage for years. And we've seen increasingly lenient sentences being imposed by judges when it comes to this type of offence, to the point that Lucy Connolly has consistently seems to be serving higher sentences for most CSA offences these days. And the thing is, the politicians aren't talking about it, not just now. No government's spoken about it for years. None of the opposition parties have spoken about it. No one is talking about it. Now, when there's a spotlight on it for things like the rape grooming gangs, then yes, they're all over it. But in terms of your general stats and what is the norm in our criminal justice system, it's just been radio silence. And like I said, nobody has acknowledged the fact that the criminal justice system has been failing to protect the most vulnerable in our society, the children, from what, in my opinion, is the most horrific of crimes. So I actually think that for the system to work, it needs radical reconstruction because it's too broken. The rot's too widespread. So I don't know whether you would agree with that assessment, but if you did, what priority would you or your party be giving to addressing it, and how far would you be prepared to go?
So we have 4 strands to the mission statement of Advance UK, and one of them is equality under the law. And absolutely, we have, I mean, we say 2-tier criminal justice to illustrate the broken system that we've got, but it could be multi-tiered. Actually, I think it's really riddled with all sorts of problems, our criminal justice system. And at the heart of it, I think, again, is the Human Rights Act coupled with progressive discrimination. Because in the pursuit of being all things, allowing all of humanity to come to the United Kingdom and welcoming all these cultures and then progressively discriminating in favor of them, we have an institutional bias by our criminal justice system, our sentencing council, and everything else in favor, frankly, of criminals and setting aside the interests of the victims. In the pursuit of the promotion of human rights, we've forgotten that actually criminals should be giving up some of perhaps not their fundamental, I mean, I hate the notion, but not giving up their fundamental human rights, but they do give up rights. When you commit a crime, you give up the right, for example, to be free. You should be incarcerated. And our criminal justice system has forgotten that. And it pursues the ideology of progressive discrimination. We saw this with the Sentencing Council the other day, coming out and saying that actually people from minority ethnic backgrounds should get more lenient sentences, and people from socially disadvantaged backgrounds should get more lenient sentences. And the Justice Secretary Shabana, instead of going to Parliament and passing a law to basically scrap the Sentencing Council, which is what should happen, another bureaucracy that shouldn't exist, she had the ignominious task of writing a letter to the Sentencing Council, appealing to the Sentencing Council not to go down the route it was going. And she's the Secretary of State for Justice. It's an absolute absurdity. And so we've got to, so many roads lead back, and this is the kind of journey of discovery I've been on. So many roads lead back to the Human Rights Act. We've got to get rid of it. And it promotes foreign criminals over British citizenry. It promotes criminals over victims. It is setting aside basic sort of self-evident moral truths, if you like. It's just setting the whole thing aside. Pedophiles, but somehow pedophilia, I, I think this is what's happening. Pedophilia is being regarded as basically the um, let me get my wording right. Pedophilia is being regarded as the liberal right of some who are attracted to young children to exercise that right. It, uh, maybe it hasn't quite got that far, but that's the direction in which pedophilia is going. And we see that with the sentencing. Pedophiles don't get the same sentences that people who've posted nasty posts on X or whatever get, like Lucy Connolly. And the whole system's been hijacked. And I have said this before, we have an extreme form of liberalism that is being practiced in society, which effectively has set aside what it means to be liberated. Liberalism is becoming the enemy of liberation, and so you can't speak your mind for fear of upsetting the minorities or upsetting this group or that group. And if you say something outrageous on X, you have the police knocking at your door. So we've got to repeal all these laws, and then we need a reversal of. And then there is a practical aspect, because it's not just about passing laws; it's about then implementing them and driving them through in an practice. So we've got to sack a lot of the judiciary. We've got to sack a lot of the barristers. There are
Is that
judges who are.
possible? Is that
Yeah,
something that a government is able to do? Because we haven't seen it. We keep hearing that they have no powers over our courts. And is it possible to sack them?
yeah. So this is the other great terrible thing that Tony Blair did, was the so-called separation of powers. He created the Supreme Court and took the most senior judges out of the House of Lords. And he basically turned our constitution over on its head, because Parliament used to be the senior most lawmaking, obviously, body in the country, but it was also the senior most adjudicating body in the country. And it was therefore a uniform body that could join up all the dots and deliver proper justice. But through the ostensible separation of powers, what you've got is a rogue, in my view, rogue Supreme Court. And I know this, and Aileen, who's listening on this chat, knows this, because we had a Supreme Court judgment that said, and I'm digressing, but it evidences the point, that the acts of union that created the country had been broken by the Northern Ireland Protocol, but that's fine. It doesn't matter that the UK doesn't exist. It's fine. I don't know how many people on this chat are aware the UK does not exist. The United Kingdom, as we think of it, does not exist any longer because of the withdrawal agreement. And the Supreme Court has adjudicated that, and it says that's absolutely fine. And yet here we are as a people just accepting that. And so the separation of powers has been another really massively failed experiment. And we've got to get back to what we were. Rupert Lowe is right to call his movement Restore Britain, because in many ways we have to restore. Before we can advance, we have to restore. So a lot of the first things that any government is going to have to do is the repealing of just about everything that's taken place since 1998. And then there's got to be the implementation of that. So then we do have to sack people. And I don't accept that we can't sack them. Of course we can sack them. We've got to get a grip of power, and then we've got to utilize that power. We've got to do it. And just one more thing I want to say: the refugee support refugee support group, if I've got the name right, is a kind of malignant pro illegal migration charity, and it has judges that are members of it, advising how to use the European Convention of Human Rights to defeat deportation. I'm not barristers members of it, judges members of it. So you've got the judiciary overtly biased. That's unacceptable. We have to blindfold justice. We've got to get back to that principle.
Thank you. Can I just come back on one of the points you've made there about the liberalism? Yeah. I completely agree. What seems to be happening is a drip feed from our courts, that basically it's a normalization. It's almost treating child sexual abuse as a misdemeanor or as a kink. And I think it's really, really damaging, because actually the message it is sending out with these lenient sentences, or effectively no sentences really, is that if you sexually abuse a child, it's probably one of the lowest risk offences you can commit in this country. Because when almost 90% of men who are alleged to have abused children don't even get to see the inside of a courtroom, let alone the inside of a prison. I mean,
Yeah.
we condemn like third world countries. We condemn certain cultures because of their treatment of children, how young they may marry them. How are we any better? We're just lying. We're better at it. And what I want to
Yeah.
see is that kind of like that facade ripped away, and people talking about this, because it is an absolute stain, and it is shameful that in this country we have so little regard for children being put through that. We have so little intention from our police to the criminal the Crown Prosecution Service to our judges to keep these men off the street. And like I said, it's the
100%.
lowest risk offence they can do. So what I would really love, and I would get behind any party that is prepared to stand up and be counted on this point, and like you said, rip it all down, because it does
Yeah.
need radical change.
I mean, the gang rape gangs is a classic example. That was paedophilia. The whole thing was raping young underage girls. That the whole thing, and it wasn't just the police who didn't do their jobs. Local councils didn't do their jobs. Community service didn't do their jobs. NHS didn't do their jobs. Everyone was guilty. And I know we fought hard to get an inquiry into it, and we've touched on this already. We don't need an inquiry, actually. We need a dedicated arm of the police force to identify who the hell was involved and arrest the bloody lot of them and throw them in behind bars. And that would send a message. But we haven't got there yet. We've got to reverse all this damage and then get to that point.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll drop down now. Thank you.
Thank you, Boudica. Thank you. We've got quite limited time. If I could ask anyone asking a question now, and Ben, I need to control you a little bit as well, if that's okay.
Sorry, yeah, of course, yeah, control me. Yeah.
If you can ask your question and then Ben responds, and if we can just sort of cap it at that and then bring the next person up, because otherwise we won't get as many people through to ask their questions. So next up is the truth.
Thank God, eh? I eventually got to speak to Ben. How you doing, Ben?
Yeah, good to speak to
you. Obviously, you can tell I've got a bit of a different accent for yourself. I've got a bit of a problem with this advanced party, right? Because it just seems to be we've got another party just recently forming. I'm not seeing any kind of substance behind it yet. I have looked into it. I've reached out to a couple of good people, obviously, namely the host, because I do respect that woman quite a lot, and she's gave me a lot of good advice in the background. The thing is obviously your aim is for 2029. We've got elections next year, and if you think Westminster's corrupt, Holyrood's even worse. We've got SNP, as you know, absolutely horrendous. And to give you a bit of background, and I'll make it quick because I know obviously people have been talking quite a lot tonight. I've always been an SNP supporter. I'm not very politically intelligent. I'm just a guy for a council estate. But I'm watching my country actually fall down the pan. I'm watching people like Hamza Yusuf, who is stealing a wage off the Scottish public, taxpayers in Scotland. He never ever spends any time in his constituency, never ever goes to Holyrood, but he's got plenty of time to go in the streets and spread his poison, etc., about other matters that doesn't have any effect on us as a country. And then we've got Anas Sanwar, who's going to be, obviously, could possibly be the Labour First Minister of Scotland. So what is it you're going to do to convince people like me that to get behind Advance UK is going to be the right move? And the second question would be, if you were to manage to get into power, would you abolish Holyrood?
Well, I'm against devolution, so you and I might be slightly different there if you're a Scottish nationalist. I mean, I believe firmly in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Just put my position. Yes, I did vote for independence in 2014, but thank God we never got it.
Yeah, okay.
I genuinely mean that. I mean, because what a state we would be in had we got independence. I mean, the country. I mean, if you look at Glasgow right now, sexual offences are up by 41%. We've got, there's a rally up in Peterhead on the 9th of August. a guy called Stephen Rennie. And if you don't know where Peterhead is, it's just a small village. It's a small town. And if
Yeah.
these people are speaking out about it, and the SNP are just constantly saying, give us more, give us more, give us more. They've got no regard for the Scottish public at all, the safety of women and children on the streets. And it's just ridiculous getting, and I just want to know if you would just get rid of it altogether, because
I
we don't have an
yeah.
MP that's worth any salt.
I mean, I can't see how the United Kingdom could be strengthened through devolution. I can't make any case for that. I can see how local government can be strengthened through local authorities who are close to the issues, but I think devolution is a fundamentally damaging thing. And what I say to people is, if you're in doubt about what to repeal that Blair did, repeal everything, because there's virtually nothing that he did that was good, and devolution was one of those things that was bad. Um, we should have a minister for every part of the United Kingdom, but we should not have devolution in my mind. And I would, get rid of Stormont, the Senate, Holyrood, and we keep what was created through Article 3 of the Acts of Union, which is Parliament in Westminster, and represent all the people of the United Kingdom through that Parliament.
Well, I appreciate that. And can I just, one of my friends has asked me to ask you a question. If that's all, I'll make it quick. It's just one quick question, if you mind if I read it out to you. So it's just leading on to work implementing the findings of Baroness Casey and the rape gangs, and it's still coming up against people who say we don't have grooming gangs in this country. A county of 1.5 million people, what would Ben do to ensure free speech within the NHS, local authorities, and civil service?
Yeah,
That's
so I mean, the thing about free speech is to get rid of. I think I've answered this question already. Get rid of progressive discrimination. Get rid of the protective blanket of immutable characteristics and religious and other beliefs. Get rid of the Human Rights Act. Re-establish what it means to be British citizen. Re-establish a blindfold around Lady Justice, and that's how you do it.
Well, hopefully that's answered the question then. But
Yeah.
listen, thanks for your time anyway, Ben. I mean,
Thank you.
I wasn't really much a supporter till I got educated very nicely by a lady who's a big supporter of yours, Aileen, from Northern Ireland.
Yeah, she's a
She
good
had a bit
lady.
of conversation maybe one night in a space, so I'm grateful to her. But listen, I mean, look, I'm not going to blindly become a member right now. I've already become a member of a party, the SDP. I blindly joined that pre-general election but I didn't even have a candidate in my area. I do obviously have options for the 2026 with Big Craig Houston being the leader of that party, and hopefully we'll see some candidates in Scotland. But I will watch these for a distance, because I'm
Thank
just
you.
not prepared to become a member right now till I see something that's going to actually stand up for us, because we're not living in an island of strangers. We're living in an island that's full of enemies, and our enemies are wanting rid of us completely.
Thank you, Truth. As always, very articulate and to the point. Thank you so much. If you're happy to drop down, that would be amazing.
No,
And
I'm not dropping down.
so I can get other people up and
Barry, I'll
lovely to
drop
hear
down.
from
But
you.
thanks for your time, pal.
Thank you so much. And Mila, your question next. And then we will be going on to MCN and podcast Andre.
Yeah, hi Ben, great to hear from you, and I'm so excited that you guys are forming this party. It's fantastic. I just wanted to ask you. Obviously, we know the most important things are probably free speech, securing the border for the UK, returning sovereignty. But the other thing I want to discuss with you, I guess there are two things. One is your position on Sharia law and whether you would consider banning it. And also, what would you do to support farmers with climate? So the UK has been conducting a climate experiment in degrowth, which is part of the EU's globalist tendencies, if you like. And you have some problems with net zero by 2050, which I totally disagree with. And obviously, it's been a broad-scale attack on farmers and food. And I wondered if you could talk about that and whether you're perhaps interested in changing that to go
Yeah, so we
nuclear or
want
do
to.
something different. Thank you.
I mean, net zero is completely mad. It doesn't matter whether you believe in man-made climate change or not. The answer is not net zero by 2050. Certainly not the way the United Kingdom is practicing it. And it's not just about getting to net zero by 2050, it's all the intermediate targets that are so damaging, getting to energy performance certificate rating of B by 2030 for all buildings in the UK. 80% of buildings don't comply. We're gonna emasculate our economy on the altar of net zero. So that can't happen. We can't allow that to happen. We've got to promote our economy. Sorry, Mila, I forgot the first part of your question. I got the net zero one. Could you just quickly
Yeah,
repeat?
so
Yeah.
I mean, we could just maybe you could talk about whether you would ban that inheritance tax.
Oh, and Sharia
That's
law.
one thing,
Yeah.
and
And
Sharia.
farmers,
Yeah.
yeah. So get rid of net zero is hugely beneficial to farmers because farmers are obviously having to pay higher taxes, pay higher costs for their fuel, pay higher taxes for costs for kerosene and fertilizers, and everything else has gone up in cost because of net zero. So all of that needs to go. We have energy costs through the roof. It's forced deindustrialization of the United Kingdom. It's not just farmers. It's the entire economic organism of the United Kingdom that is suffering on the altar of net zero. Sharia law, there's no place for Sharia law or any other law in the United Kingdom. There can only be one law, and that's part of our mission statement. We make that very clear in the constitutional documents of Advance UK. Yeah, I think that was was there anything else? Did I
Yes,
miss? Yeah.
no, that's okay. I guess you haven't just touched on inheritance tax because, as I
Inheritance,
understand,
abolish
that's
it.
the biggest problem, right?
Inheritance tax is an absolutely evil tax at every level. It's not just for farmers, for small businesses, for individuals, people. I think it was Julia who said part of the reason she's in Portugal is because they don't have inheritance tax. And we pay our taxes all our lives. We save up our money. We want to leave something for our offspring, and that is taken away by the state. It's completely wrong. It's a morally wrong tax. But of course, it's deeply damaging to farms in particular and to small businesses that are, specialized and of a family nature because it busts up the family's ability to hold that business together from generation to generation. So that has to be reversed. And also, as far as net zero goes, by the way, it's also deeply damaging in the way that they're putting solar farms all over our green fields. And, that's a short hop and a skip before then they convert those solar farms into multi-story residential blocks for people who shouldn't be in the country in the first place.
Yes, that's right. And in fact, Italy has banned putting solar farms onto farmland. So I think that's quite a useful policy that they've implemented to stop that from happening. In terms of deportation of Pakistani rape gang criminals, would you be in favor of doing that?
So I'm in favor of deporting anyone in the United Kingdom who is foreign and committed a crime. I don't care what the severity of the crime is. The minute they commit a crime, they're out. And it doesn't just apply to Pakistanis, it applies to everyone. But there is also, by the way, just for people to be aware, and I have said this before, a Pakistan prisoner transfer treaty with the United Kingdom, which was signed in 2018, which allows the United Kingdom to deport any criminals in the United Kingdom who hold Pakistani nationality. But the big drawback is the European Convention of Human Rights. I go straight back to the Human Rights Act because it requires the consent of the deportee to go back to Pakistan. It's absolutely absurd. And of course, they won't go back to Pakistan. And it's a false notion to think that the vast majority of Pakistanis wouldn't do anything other than absolutely treat these people with contempt. It was a capital punishment offense, paedophilia, in Pakistan until 2016, I think I'm going by memory. And the Pakistani authorities, I've spoken at senior level to Pakistani law enforcement, and they say to me that they would gladly take back these bastards to Pakistan and punish them under in Pakistani prisons, which would be a completely different experience to British prisons. But the British government has not once has the British government reached out to the Pakistan government and said, "Can you please deal with this issue?" Not once. It's an absolute travesty that they haven't used that treaty.
Thank you, Mila. Hopefully that answers all your questions. Are you happy to
Thank
drop
you very
down
much,
now?
Ben, and I wish all of you a great deal of luck and good speed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. MCN, lovely to see you. You are up next.
Hi everybody. It's been a great space so far. There's been lots of topics that I would have asked questions about, but they've already been covered. So it's lovely to hear somebody talk about the Constitution for once. That's great. A little hobby horse of mine, as well as the ECHR and the Human Rights Act. So I wanted to ask a slightly different question, slightly different tack, which is about talking about the repeal. I'm curious to know whether this would be repeal or implied repeal, mainly because it's the kind of big sexy headline is the Equality Act, Human Rights Act, and so on. But once those things are repealed, it will leave previous laws on the books, so to speak. So just a very, very quick example. The Supreme Court gave a judgment not that long ago under the Equality Act interpretation of what is a woman. Once that's repealed, you would then go back to the definition under the Gender Recognition Act. So effectively just removing any protection that women have again. So I'm just wondering, in terms of repeal or implied repeal, how much detail do you expect? I'm sure you haven't done it yet, so no pressure. But how much detail will the team at Advance be going into to look at all of the tentacles that some of these laws and the repealing of some of those laws might uncover? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think a partial repeal of anything between today and 1998, a partial repeal is dangerous because a partial repeal leaves in situ other acts of parliament and precedent and so on that might come back to haunt us, having been unchecked. Because the approach to dealing with legislation since 1998, since Blair did his constitutional revolution, has been to plaster over problems that we identify. So, for example, there was a suggestion recently that we should have a Freedom of Speech Act, an act that protects freedom of speech. And I so disagree with that. The notion that you need a new act of parliament to protect freedom of speech, I think, is a fundamentally flawed concept. What we've got to do is actually, frankly, actually repeal everything pretty much back to 1998. And if necessary, pass a law saying that any precedent that was created in that period through the judicial process must be ignored. And we need to go back to the pre-Tony Blair constitutional revolution. I had no for me, MCN, it was a joke when someone said to me, define a woman. When I first, as I mentioned earlier on in this conversation, if you were there, my travel through politics has been peeling back an onion and slowly seeing more and more and more. And when I first got into politics, and quite a long time for when I was during the time I was in politics, I wasn't even aware that defining a woman was an issue. It was so self-evident to me what a woman is. And thank God for that, because it's been one of the great pleasures of my life, knowing what women are. And it's just bizarre to me that we need a Supreme Court ruling to do it. And I think that we've just got to go back to the pre-1997 status quo. And we may make mistakes going back to the pre-1997. It may not be the ideal position to get to, but it will be a million times better than where we are at the moment. What we must not do is layer more legislation on bad legislation. That's critical.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Ben. And can I'm just going to do a very probably unpopular shout out. There are one or two lawyers that are not completely hideous, but there is only one or two, so I'll give them the credit. But thank you.
Thank you, MCN. That's great. Are you happy to drop down and I can get more people up? Podcast Andre has been waiting very patiently, and you are next. Oh, so patiently that he might have dropped off. I am so sorry. So, Richard, did you have a question? You don't have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I did have a question. I think a lot of what I was going to ask has actually been covered now, but one thing I will bring up, and it's probably something that'll bore most people, is defence, because that's my general area of interest. And Obviously, the NATO countries have now agreed to 5% under pressure from Trump. And I just wanted to know what we as a party are going to be doing in regards to defence. One of the things I would like us to commit to is to try to bring all procurement back into the UK. I think we're missing a massive trick by buying foreign systems, foreign components for those systems. And in order to really boost our economy, we should be producing everything, or at least everything we can, in-house. And I wondered what policies we may have to incentivise that, and also microchips. We've got a critical vulnerability in regards to microchips and semiconductors, with most of ours being procured from Taiwan. Now, obviously, geopolitics means that we may have a problem getting those microchips in the not too distant future if things kick off with China. So obviously Trump has introduced his CHIPS Act. I was wondering if it would be a policy for us to do something similar.
So I don't want to make policy on behalf of the party because, we're going to have a process by which we do that through committees of the college and the executive, and then, being approved by the board. But I completely wholeheartedly agree with you. An essential component of defense is procurement. Procurement, your ability to procure you can't be any better at defense than your ability to procure defense. And one of the terrible things that Keir Starmer is doing is taking us into the European Defence Union, which is basically signing us up to interoperability with the European, effectively the army that Brussels wants to create, which is not like NATO. It's not lots of member states coming together deciding to protect each other. It's an integrated European Defence Union, as the name suggests. And it will require us to adopt interoperable systems with the EU, which means we will not be an independent fighting force, and we will be buying European kit, and we'll be having European software, and we'll be able to be shut down by the Europeans if we don't do what they want. And apart from anything else, we have to also sign up to supporting their foreign policy, which is another key component of defence. So I completely agree with you, Richard. We've got to bring defence firmly back to the United Kingdom, procure as much as we can over here, and we need to take steps to protect our access to chips. And that's also why, we must very carefully, strategically define who we are going to stand up for in the globe. And it's got to put British interests first. I'm sick and tired of foreign policy made through the prism of some kind of moral ideology. I'm not saying that we should be morally corrupt, of course not, but we've got to be guided by what is in the British national interest when we're looking at foreign policy. Every other sane country does that, and we've got to start doing it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Richard. So, Ben, I just need to do a check-in with you and Jim. We have been going for quite a long time. I currently have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people with their hands up that have come through and are waiting to speak. Can I get roughly a cut-off point? Because I do still have a lot of people requesting a question, so I just need to...
Well, from my point of view, I think the questions from the speakers tonight have been fantastic. Really enjoyed listening to them. So look, why don't we go for a round number of 10 more? I'm happy to be here and happy to take any questions, of course. But obviously Ben as well, if he's in agreement, then I'm happy to go until we get the next 10 speakers up and let them ask their questions.
Yeah, me too. And Jim, by all means, please take the questions. You're every bit as knowledgeable about what the party's going to do as I am. So maybe, Jim, you take the next 10 questions and I'll listen.
Thanks a lot, Ben. Yeah, no pressure, no pressure. Thank you.
Right, Jim, you're in the hot seat now, and we have the lovely Katie that's got a question for you.
Oh, I knew this was going to happen. But I was going to say hi, Ben. Hi, Jim. And Ben, hello to your lovely son that's listening. Ben, first and foremost, how are you? It's been a while, but okay, how are you doing? Obviously, creating a party like this is no easy feat. And I wouldn't suggest anybody else but you to do it. And I'm really, really excited, especially from the conversations we've had historically. I'm so sorry, Jim. Oh, someone's got their microphone open, but that's okay. So, that someone's got their microphone open. Anywho, I wanted to say to you, Ben, and Jim, and Richard, I'm ready, willing, and available. Ever since I met you, Ben, on the set of Nigel Farage's not Between Two Pints, but you know, the interview that I did with Nigel Farage and where you get to drink a beer. From that very day, I was enamored by all that you stood for and stand for. And as somebody myself who has studied law, public law, and criminal law being my two top favorites, not land and trust, no offense to anyone that's into land and trust. But I'm ready, willing, and available. I'd be more than happy to come on board in any capacity and stand in your corners and fight the good fight.
Well, that's terrific to hear. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for your kind words about me. Um, and that's what we've done. So that's what we're striving to do, which is to get members to come forward and put themselves forward for the college or in due course. We're actually focusing really on the college at the moment. So if you're particularly triggered about the state the country's in, and you believe in our mission, please put yourself forward for the college. And there's a process for it. I think if it's not on the website at the moment, it will be on the website very, very soon. And we welcome members to come forward. That's what we want. We want representation.
I absolutely love that. If it is available, please do put it in the jumbotron. The jumbotron being shared the that tweet post into the header here, so that those that are interested can click on that and follow through. Otherwise, go to the website, which you can find obviously on Ben's profile, Advanced UK's profile, Jim's, etc. But thank you for having me up, and
Thank
I
you.
am so proud. I'm so proud of you and all that you've been doing. And I truly believe in just getting rid of like the 1980s style library book system of check in, check out, scribbling over and sellotaping these legislations
Yeah.
together. And it just needs to be
It
wiped
needs to be
clean.
wiped
Do you know
clean.
what I mean?
Absolutely. We need a
Yeah.
bonfire of the legislation. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, well, I will absolutely be there. So I will send you a message in the back channels. But Ben, well done. I'm very, very proud of you all and looking forward to hopefully being part of the future of
Thank you.
tomorrow.
Katie, thank you so much. And next is Reason Defends Freedom. You've been waiting very patiently. Yeah, there you go.
Hello. First off, obviously, pleasure to meet you, Ben, and it's also nice to meet Jim. I just have a quick question in regards to Brexit. Now, you've argued that Brexit hasn't been fully realised due to government inaction, which I completely agree with. But what economic policies would advance UK pursue to capitalise on the freedoms, such as trade deals, deregulation? And then, on the back of that, how would you convince voters that those would address cost of living pressures?
Okay. So trade deals. I'm not. Everyone bangs on about trade deals. Trade deals. International trade is actually quite fluid just under WTO terms. The ability to trade internationally has been made much, much easier over the decades. Trade deals maybe add, a, a fraction of a percent to one's ability to trade more freely, but they're not the be all and end all. The critical thing that matters is that the United Kingdom produces product and services that the rest of the world wishes to buy. That is fundamental. And that is enabled much more by domestic policy than it is through trade deals. And I think it's a distraction when governments talk about the ability to sign up a trade deal with this, that, and the other country. And in many respects, freedom of trade has been has had a great damaging impact on the United Kingdom and has accelerated our deindustrialization because we have chosen to buy cheap stuff from abroad rather than protecting our own. And of course, there's a balance to be had between getting cost effective product for our consumers and protecting our producers. But there's definitely a balance to be had. And what we've done is throw our producers under a bus for decades in the pursuit of cheap consumer goods. And we've actually enriched nations that abuse human rights in the pursuit of producing cheap product, which we've then bought and beating the drum of human rights ourselves at this end. The whole thing has been topsy-turvy. But the key things that we would do if we are liberated genuinely from the international order is one, you close your borders so that you don't have cheap imported unskilled labor, which puts a huge demand on our public services, our housing, our schooling, our NHS, undermines the ability for a British worker to get a fair wage. That's critical. You deregulate business, you get rid of net zero, which would cheapen energy dramatically, which would help every single business in the United Kingdom, whether or not you're an industry or elsewhere. You reduce taxes. You know, this obsession with increasing taxes, in the notion that everything's got to be funded through the tax pocket. Every time the states wanted to extend its arm, it's justified raising taxes. That's completely wrong. What we've got to reacquaint ourselves with is that the economic organism that is the United Kingdom flourishes if the private sector flourishes, and we're killing the private sector through taxation. That's why we've had no growth in the last, well, partly mass immigration, but partly because of over-regulation, net zero, and too high a tax rate. We've got to reduce taxes, enable businesses to make more money. The Laffer curve is a real thing. When you overtax people and you overtax businesses, you destroy an economy. So all of that needs to be reversed, none of which is possible while we're still hitched at the hip to the EU as we are at the moment.
Thank you. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, more than. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. And thank you for your patience. I know you were hanging around a very long time. Marlon, hi, good evening. How are you? It's you up next.
Hi, thank you. This is to Ben and Jim. So I've been a campaigner for the last few years for a national inquiry. Obviously, we've got that now. However, I have my concerns with Labour. And I guess politically, I don't care about so much about political parties. What I care about is parties being unite and holding Labour accountable. So we have, I guess, a robust inquiry. As far as Advance UK, would you be supporting this and questioning the inquiry if needs be?
Jim, do you want to go? Do you want to answer that one, Jim?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, first of all, Marlon, I think it's great to see you here, and the work that you're doing has been tremendous.
Thank
Very
you.
much, no, it's very much appreciated, and I think we definitely do need to do that. But I would go back to a point that Ben Habib has also said, because inquiries are all very well. I very much agree with Ben's point of view that we need a specialised police force to actually enforce existing laws and go after those that committed those horrendous crimes. But inquiries are good. I do agree that we need to have cross-party support. One of the things I fundamentally believe in is unity, because unity is strength. One of the things as an Advance UK College member that I'll be looking to do is to reach out to some of the very good other parties that exist and the leadership within them. Obviously, I've nailed my colours to Advance UK because I really do believe in what Ben is doing in terms of his vision and his capability. And having worked previously with him in the Brexit Party, I know he's more than capable of taking this party forward. And it's important to remind people that this isn't a movement, this is a political party. And it's important because that's the only way we're going to effect change is through the ballot box. So my position on it, Marlon, is that absolutely it is important that we hold the Labour government to account. They're failing in practically every other way, including the national inquiry into the rape gangs. This is something that has become an international disgrace, not just a national disgrace, but an international scandal in itself. And we definitely need to continue with that, and I would be fully supportive of it. So hopefully that's given you my position on it. Over to you, Ben.
Have we lost Ben?
Sorry,
He's
I'm
gone for a couple. He's
sorry,
back. He's back.
I muted myself. It's a very rare thing for me to shut up. But no, I completely agree with all of that, Jim. Absolutely, and yeah, the inquiry. I don't want to denigrate an inquiry. Of course, an inquiry can shed light, but in my experience in life, inquiries that just tend to, brush things under a carpet over a period of time. It takes 3 years to do the inquiry. It costs an inordinate amount of money. By the time you get to the conclusion, it's 300 pages long. No one reads it, and it's not actually conclusive. We saw Tony Blair, for example, get away with his war in Iraq, which has done so much damage. And so as Jim reiterated something I said earlier, I think we need a dedicated arm of the law to go after not just those who committed the rapes, but actually those who were complicit in the rapes by not calling them out at the time, and bang them all up and send a message. We don't tolerate this kind of thing. Be helpful law and justice message to send.
I agree. I've said this on national TV, and people might find this bizarre. I am more angry with local authorities and police force than I am actually with the groomers, because they should have been there to protect in my example, my daughter, and there wasn't. And I want these made accountable. But what concerns me, and I've even, I'm having meetings at Westminster at the moment. Political parties are already point scoring,
Yeah,
even at the early stages, and that is really frustrating.
yeah, it's awful. I agree.
But thank you. You've reassured me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marlon. Lovely to see you again as well. I hope you're well. Right, next, Ash, if you would like to ask your question, and then we will move on to Shai. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hi, Ben. Hi, Jim. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Ash.
Hi, Ben. So when I first met you and Jim, it was through the Brexit Party, right? If I recall correctly. And since then, we've been involved, obviously, in a lot of work separately and together. You chaired that very first Don't Divide Us meeting in response to the BLM riots, to launch the Don't Divide Us project, on which I worked for quite some time. And you've obviously been doing other things like the Great British Pack and the Northern Ireland Protocol Challenge and all sorts of stuff, since you've come onto the political scene. If you recall, after the Rupert Lowe situation, I WhatsApped you, I think, at some point, and I said, despair. And you had said something along the lines of, don't despair, this is a necessary catharsis. So when I saw Advance UK, what popped into my head, and the question I would like to ask you, and also Jim, is do you see this as the result of that catharsis, or do you see this as an ongoing part, Advance UK as an ongoing part of that catharsis of which you spoke?
So, is your question, Ash, are we the solution or are we part of the evolution of a solution?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I hope, well, I think, I hope we are the solution. I hope Advance UK will stay true to its principles, that its principles will manifest themselves in policies and the presence of people on the political stage, which can then deliver those policies and save the United Kingdom. Of course, that in itself is a process and an evolution. And and by the way, that's why I think it's so important to have the right constitutional setup for a party, and why it's not just the kind of, oh well, let's just get on, this kind of laissez-faire, let's just get on, set up a political party, let's get on with it. We all know where we want to get to. Yep, fine, but that won't deliver the results. You need something that is, it's like an army that is seeking to go into battle. It's got to have its logistics sorted out. It's got to have its supply line sorted out, or it won't be able to sustain itself in the fight. And which is why I spent quite a lot of time making sure the constitution of the party was right, getting the right people around it to start with. It took me ages getting it launched. Richard Shaw, who I imagine is still listening, was texting me every day saying, when the hell are you going to launch this damn party? We've all been waiting for it, blah, blah, blah. But I think, I think we now have got the right party. And if the right people come on board, then I think it will evolve into something that could deliver for the country.
If I could maybe just come in as well, because Ash, first of all, it's great to see you, and I always enjoyed campaigning with you in the Brexit Party and our discussions. You're a great guy, and good to see you here. I think what Ben is saying is that Advance UK has come into existence primarily because of the failure of the other parties. And whilst Reform has done quite well in the polls, I think it's because a lot of people saw them as the only option. But the biggest problem to that is that they're not. They are all about one particular man, Nigel. Nigel is the party. Nigel is Reform UK, and Reform UK is Nigel. And I think what the difference is, what Ben has done, what he's created here, in particular in terms of the structure with Advance UK College, is that he's demonstrating a commitment to the people. He wants to put the power back into the people's hands, back into the party members' hands. And that is fundamentally important and different from any other party that exists. And the reason I've come on board is because I have huge respect for Ben, but also for the other members of Advance UK. They're a great bunch, and they're a very, very clever bunch. So what we're doing is we're moving things forward. Policy is going to be something I'm particularly interested in. I have huge interests in national defence and huge interests in defence internationally as well. But I also have big interests in farming and healthcare and all these other things. So part of my job is to give policy to the executive and to Ben for approval, to make suggestions, things like not being handing our sovereignty away to international bodies like the World Health Organization, for example, the World Economic Forum. They have no business in the UK's business. We are more than capable of taking care of our own business. Thank you very much. That's why I fought for British independence with the Brexit Party. So my involvement will be to put those policies forward, move things into the spotlight, if you like, in collaboration with others. And what Ben is doing is he's taking in people through a process which is tough, but nevertheless very necessary to get the kind of people that he wants to help structure the party moving forward. But I would say, Ash, knowing you and having worked with you in the past, you're exactly the kind of person that we need. I've heard many speakers tonight who are making fantastic points, making great questions as well. So I would say, keep in contact, because we are serious about it. We are drawing the line in the sand. Advance UK means business, and so does Ben, and I'm very happy to stand with him in support of Advance UK. So hopefully that's given you my outlook, my position on it.
Thanks very much. It was lovely to hear from you both. Good luck.
Thank you.
Hi, Ash. Thank you so much. So next this evening, Shai. Hi, how are you? Your question next.
I'm really well, thanks, Ava. Brilliant space, by the way. Thank you. Hi, Ben. Hi, Jim. You two are proper growing on me. It's an absolute pleasure for you to talk to me. No, not me. The other way around. For me to talk to you. I've been dying to speak to you for ages. I'm one of the CEOs of the Phoenix Post. We've been on the child protection scene for something like 25 years. What we've come specifically to ask you, Ben and Jim, is that we believe, as victims of child sexual abuse, that there's a particular sort of prejudice aimed at only us. So only victims of child sexual abuse get called child slags. And we get called child prostitutes instead of prostituted children. They call those indecent images that happen to us child porn instead of crime scene pictures. And we fight against all that gnarly language that is aimed just around us. So what we've been trying to do for the past 10, 15 years is get you lot to recognise that there is a specific prejudice that people aim at us, and that it really affects our justice, the support that we get afterwards and during and before. And we call it anti-victim prejudice, or to be short, AVP. And what we wanted the government to do was attach us to the anti-discrimination laws, that being the victim of child sexual abuse was a special acknowledgement. I can't remember what they called it, but it's a special protected element, and that we should be attached to that, because if we outlawed anti-victim prejudice, Ben, then they wouldn't be able to do half of the crap they get away with behind closed doors that would be considered anti-victim prejudice. I'll give you one example. I'm a victim of horrible child abuse. Don't worry about the details. Just believe me, it was horrible and it was a lot. Well, they have treated me like unbelievable crap over the years, not because I've ever done anything wrong, but because I was the victim of child sexual abuse. They have prejudiced my entire life with this crap. And I'm sorry, but I've never done any, I didn't become a paedophile, nothing happened. In fact, I went on to become child protector alongside a lady called Sarah Payne, who actually this month is the month 25 years anniversary of when that man stole her daughter out of the field, took her off and made her be dead, the known paedophile Roy Whiting, and who's fighting to get out right now. And we have said that if you would outlaw anti-victim prejudice and make it so that they can't call us child prostitutes, they can't call what happened to us by a child-attracted adult. No, it was a nonce, it was a pedo. Now, don't be silly, and it doesn't matter how they come rap to us. They do the same thing to us, so we don't actually care about all of that. I do like your thing on Sharia law, but my question would be, would you please, to either of you, agree to acknowledge first that anti-victim prejudice exists? In other words, it's a specific prejudice just aimed at me and my kind. And then would you agree to maybe help get it put on as a special acknowledgement on the anti-discrimination laws to give us a chance? Thank you. And that was all I wanted to say. Brilliant room, by the way.
I'll just very quickly speak, and then Jim, perhaps you could elaborate. But I mean, I completely agree. There is a prejudice against victims, and criminals are afforded protections that victims are not. And the balance of blame is being shifted from criminals to victims. And, we get peculiar judgments like, that chap couldn't be deported to Albania, even though he'd done this, that. I can't remember the exact crime, because his son didn't like chicken nuggets in Albania. And this guy was a criminal. And there was a rapist, a foreign rapist, who wasn't going to be deported because it would compromise his right to a family life. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. We've forgotten what criminal justice is about. And again, I'm really sorry to labor the point, but it goes back to this Human Rights Act, which has turned everything on its head. It's codified what it means to be human, and it's removed responsibility from humanity, and it's removed a sense of citizenry, as I've also mentioned, and it's protected criminals and thrown victims under a bus. It's all happened through that pernicious legislation, and we've got to reverse that. Jim, do you have anything to add? I'll
Well,
let you.
just to add to that,
Yeah.
Ben, let me just add that the people that promised to take the European Court of Human Rights to court on our behalf and get that law changed and get it brought in was, in fact, Tony Blair and Cherie Blair, the QC at the time. They promised they'd do this for us for years, and it just never happened. And they even made me children's champion, the very first ever children's champion, on the promise that they would acknowledge and then outlaw AVP. Because look, in some courts they were calling us child slags,
Yeah,
children under 16, called as if somehow that made it our fault.
that's disgusting.
Sorry, but yes, just wanted to add that.
Just on that point, Shai, first of all, I totally commend the work that you're doing. You're a strong, powerful voice for those who are victims. And let's be clear, there is no such thing as a child prostitute. They have no say in the matter. They are victims of some of the most horrendous crimes. So absolutely, anti-victim prejudice does exist. Absolutely. We've seen what's happened in many English towns. Rotherham and others, where the girls involved have been made to look like they're the ones who are at fault, and the police and the social workers and even healthcare professionals, their so-called professionals, have been guilty of anti-victim prejudice. Absolutely. The second point I would say is yes, to get an acknowledgement in Parliament. One of the things, if enough of us get elected, and I'm only a member at the moment, but if that ever happens, we would do that. The first order of any government is to protect the people. And once again, Ben is absolutely right when he talks about the European Court of Human Rights, the ECHR. It is a massive obstacle. And both the Conservative Party and the Labour Party government have completely failed to address these issues. If we can get rid of ECHR, then we're going to be on a winning ticket to get true justice for the people of this country, and in particular, those who have been victims of some of the most horrendous crimes when it comes to that. So absolutely, the anti-victim prejudice does exist, absolutely, and yes, to get an acknowledgement at the highest levels. So hopefully that's given you
I
much.
love you. I think I'll be voting for you no matter what you stand for. You could stand for a piece of toast just for saying that. Thank you.
No,
And let me
you will
just
find
finish
you will
this.
find, Shy, that when Ben says something, he means it, and I mean
He
what I say as well. So absolutely, thank
Well,
you.
just to sort of top your point, the last four leading court of human rights bloody cases, ordinary cases that went to the European courts, was their right to be called Mister, their right to eat chocolate in prison, their right to vote from prison, and their right not to poo in a bucket. Now we can't get legal aid for any kind of help to change the rules, but they can get legal aid up the wazoo to go to the high courts. They won their right not to poo in a bucket. They won their right to be called Mister, but not their right to eat chocolate. But this is the sort of thing we're facing all the time.
Absolutely, and as I say, we will be fighting for the people. That's what Advance UK is all about. It's getting justice, it's getting safety back into the streets, it's getting rid of the criminals, and I fully support Ben's plan to deport all those who break the laws, regardless of where they're from. So we want justice for the people for sure. Thank you, Shai.
Shai, thank you so much. We're getting down to our last 6 people now. So if I can ask you, because we have run over significantly, if I can ask you to be as quick as you can with your questions, if that's okay. And thank you for your patience. Oluomo, do you have a question now for Jim and Ben?
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, guys. Thank you, host. Good evening, Ben and Jim as well. Just gonna have quick questions. Gonna put to Jim and Ben. Going to be talking about immigration itself. I mean, in a couple of years and recent year, we have seen quite significant numbers of new immigrants coming to the UK. So when I'm talking about new immigrants, I'm talking about legal immigrants, not obviously people coming off boats and stuff. I mean, people have legally come into the UK here. I mean, migrants working hard, contributing to the UK economy itself, filling so many essential roles here. I mean, look at, for example, sectors like the NHS, social care, transport, hospitality, this kind of stuff itself. But unfortunately, many of these, a lot of individuals are also not just working itself, they're also paying their taxes and also raising families and becoming part of the social, I'll use the term probably social fabric of life in the UK itself. But unfortunately, a lot of them also face a lot of challenges like ranging from unstable immigration status, that kind of stuff. So my question to Ben or probably Jamie will be, I mean, what are your long-term plans for immigrants? When I'm talking about immigrants, I'm talking about legal immigrants working in the UK, contributing to UK economy, paying their taxes, work already here in the UK itself, and of course, building their lives in the UK. So what kind of plans do you guys have for them? I'll use the mic for now. Thank you.
I'll just very quickly answer, then Jim, please pitch in. But we've got 7.7 million British citizens on universal credit out of a workforce of 31 million. 3 million of those 7.7 million people are claiming mental health issues and not working at all or looking for a job. 1.5 million people are looking for a job but haven't got one. 1.5 million people are actually working and surviving on universal credit. And then you've got some others. We've got a broken labour force. The United Kingdom is not working. And it's partly because of unbridled, unskilled, whatever they might say, it's unskilled immigration in mass numbers from abroad. That has to stop and it has to be reversed. So, as I mentioned at the outset, I think of this chat, we've got to have a moratorium on a moratorium on indefinite leave to remain, and a moratorium on granting of British citizenship while we've got so many people in this country, because at the moment, as long as you stay here long enough, you eventually get a passport. That's got to stop. And then we've got to have effectively a reversal of the mass migration that we've had to the United Kingdom through principally economic means, cutting taxes on the working middle class, cutting welfare payments and benefits to those who are not working and don't need that protection, creating a gap between benefits and what you can earn working, and getting British people to fulfill those jobs, and writing the economic organism, for want of a better word, better description, and writing that economic organism and dealing with mass migration at the same time.
Well, just to add to that, we're seeing an exodus of the wealth creators from the UK, about 14,000 in the last 12 months, because of the appalling taxation and other things that the Labour government are doing. Once again, Ben's points about the economic situation is very, very important. We want to get people back to work. We want them to have their self-respect. People who get into fulfilling employment are productive. They're a lot happier. They keep their self-respect more. If you take the welfare budget and what we spend as a nation, what the taxpayers have to fund, it's greater than defence, health, education. In fact, every other fund of money that needs to be found, it's greater than all of them combined. That shows you the scale of the problem as far as welfare is concerned. I would also say there's a big difference between legal migration and illegal migration. The biggest problem at the moment is most certainly illegal immigration, because from a national security point of view, we do not know who's coming in. They are unvetted. There is a lot of evidence pointing to this being a planned event. There are globalist orders and globalist bodies that are certainly not just in the UK, but in Europe, up until recently in America, at the southern border, quite deliberately taking in vast numbers of undocumented young men. And we have to point out, these are not asylum seekers. There's very few women and children, if any, coming across the English Channel. And I know that Ireland has a huge problem with this. They are predominantly young men aged between 19 and 33. They're coming, they're getting rid of their documents, their ID, their passports, so that they can't be checked. There is no employment for them. They're being putting up in hotels at great expense to the taxpayer. This can't continue, yet the Labour government continually throws money at wars in the likes of Ukraine. So it's really time to put Britain first. It's time for the British people to be given priority over these things. As far as legal migration is concerned, as far as people who are here legally, who are part of British society, they will always have our full support. Once again, I know, because I speak to so many people who may have come here as immigrants, or their families may have come here as immigrants many generations ago, who are just as worried, just as appalled at the threat that these young migrant men pose. It's a huge destabilizing problem, and it's one that has to be tackled, and it's going to be tackled. And when Ben gets the party moving forward as he is doing, it's only been going for a few days. We've already achieved enormous success there with the membership. As soon as that continues to build and grow at the next general election, people will have the ability to vote for a party they truly believe in. And before I hand it back to the host, I will also say that once that happens, people are going to see the huge benefits of voting for a party that they actually believe in. I mean, how many times have we gone to an election thinking we'll vote for the least worst? That's no way to vote. We want people and leaders like Ben Habib that we can actually trust, who will deliver on their promises and actually put those words into actions. And that is what we need to do. And that's what I'm absolutely committed to doing in supporting Advance UK. So thank you for your question. I think it's been great points. And on that, I'll hand back to the host. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Jardine, you are next. Now we're down to our last speakers now. So just to let you know in order, it will be Jardine, Podcast, AI Velma, Shankhill and Stephen Rennie. And then we will look, Rennie, sorry, we will look to start to close the space out. So Jardine, you've been very patient. What would your question be?
Nice one, thank you. I just like to say to Ben, you're like a real inspiration, man, as a political figure, like, so thank you, man, and I appreciate a lot of the stuff what you say on Tally and stuff. I just wanted to ask you about I don't know if you've mentioned it previously about like this woke ideologies and which have taken over all in the sort of public sectors of things. What would your party be doing about that? I mean, you probably have already mentioned it, but would you just be putting a stop to it completely? Because it just seems like it's a lot of brainwashing. Because I work at the local hospital in the area, and it's wild, some of the stuff, which is the money what has been spent on things. Even positions for staff, like a whole dedicated team of people, 8 people on a band 5 wage, pushing mental illness, in my opinion. I've got a wild story, bro. If I could DM you as well, where I'm losing my job as well at the NHS because of having just a political view. So really just like yours, Ben. So you wouldn't be allowed to work at the hospital, mate. But yeah, I'd just like to see what you thought about what your opinion on this woke ideology and just destroying it completely out of the system what we're living in.
I think woke ideology, in summary, is basically the opposite of democracy. It's the protection and promotion of minorities, whatever that description is, however you define a minority, over and above and often to the detriment of the majority. That's what it is. It's progressive discrimination on steroids, damaging the interests of the majority. And that is basically the opposite of democracy. We've set aside the interests of the majority in favor of the minority. And of course, minorities, to the extent that we have minorities in our society, they deserve not to be prejudiced against, not to be victimized in any way, shape, or form. But policy must be made for the majority's interest. That's critical, because otherwise, what does it mean to be in the majority? It sets aside the meaning of democracy. And I don't buy into this concept of the tyranny of the majority. I think it's perfectly, a government should be perfectly capable of balancing the needs of the majority with the protection of the minorities. And so woke ideology has to just be burnt on an altar. Progressive discrimination is nothing more than discrimination. It's prejudice. It's the embedding of prejudice. Even Martin Luther King said it's not the color of the skin that matters, it's the content of your character. And we need to go fundamentally back to that principle.
Nah, sure, man. The thing is, what I really don't understand in the hospital as well is the hospital is there just to get people better, get them back home, back with the families and well. I don't understand why these things have got to be pushed onto people. Like how they're changing speech in maternity wards, man, like saying chest feeders. It's like sounds like some sort of alien out of, out of one of the Alien films or something, a chest feeder.
Well, it is. I mean, I think it is liberalism at an innocent level. It's liberalism gone mad. If you were to participate in potentially sort of conspiratorial approach to what's going on, this is the hijacking of Western civilization by Marxism. I mean, that's another way to put it. And people often link the World Economic Forum to what's going on. And I've got no empirical evidence to suggest that Klaus Schwab is like Blofeld sitting in the World Economic Forum pulling everyone's strings. But when you get the most powerful people in the world meeting the most wealthy people in the world behind closed doors without minutes being taken, bad things can happen. And when you get really big money combining with big power, actually, that's the root of totalitarian fascism. That's what it is. And call it Marxism, fascism, whatever. The system's out of balance. It's wrong. And we've got to go back to being our lovely, beautiful, settled, calm British democracy that we used to have.
Jardine, if I could just also say, as an advanced UK college member, I would be very much of the opinion that DEI is not conducive to good policy. People should get positions on merit, not on gender, not on sexual preference. None of these things truly matter. I think a ban on gender ideology and CRT in all schools to restore real British history, literature, and patriotism to the classroom, end the university cartel, new tech colleges, apprenticeships, real world skills, and our children will learn to love Britain, not be taught to hate it. And I think that's where we've been fundamentally going wrong over many generations. But I think it was a good question. Thank you.
Nice one,
Jardine,
boys. Thank you.
Jardine, thank you so much for that. And I'm really, really sorry to hear what you're going through at the moment. Obviously, I don't know the manner of what's happened, but if it does involve freedom of speech, I don't know if you've heard of the Free Speech Union. That may be useful, but do feel free to reach out to us. If we can help at all, we will. But thank you so much.
Nice one, thank you.
Now, if we could go on to podcast, I know that you have been waiting very patiently for most of the evening, and you did drop out at one stage.
I did, yes, I had to. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Good evening. It's lovely to be able to speak to Ben and Jim. I have a tremendous amount of respect for both of you for what you're doing, and I want to encourage you to keep doing that. I'm sure there are a lot of people who support what you do and what you intend to do. Now, I don't know how many members Advance UK have, but I can tell you you've got one more due to this podcast. I'm what you'd call a dissolution reformer myself. I stood for reform last year. I created a local reform branch from scratch, so I know the amount of work required for that, but I'm quite disappointed with where reform are going, so I'm looking for something else. I'm hoping this is it, and I'd be happy to get involved, maybe helping in setting up policies and things like that, or maybe anything else. We shall see. I just wanted to ask one very quick question. A big challenge for a brand new political party is, let's say, brand recognition countrywide. How do you plan to make Advance UK known everywhere in preparation for the 2029 election, if I might ask? Thank you.
Oh, I've already done this once in my very short political career. When I joined Reform, it was polling at 6%. By the time the general election was called, it was polling at 16%. And it's doable. And I think it's partly doable because the British electorate is looking for something new. They're looking. They're not satisfied anymore with the status quo of the two-party system. They want something new, and Reform filled that void. Reform, sadly, as you've just described, podcast, is dropping the ball on so many people's hopes and aspirations. And I think that as long as we are clear in our messaging, communicate our messaging, are relentless in the way that we go about doing it, and don't, take our foot off the pedal, we will cut through. I joined Reform in March 2023. A year and a quarter later, we were winning seats in the general election. And, I took great encouragement, by the way, from Reform doing so well in the local elections. Now, many people may have thought, well, why would Ben take encouragement from that? Because, he's fundamentally a critic now of Reform. But I take encouragement from it because it evidenced that the electorate really is looking for change. And I think it was you, YC, who opened by saying that it's none of the above is the winning party. And so let's try and make it at least one of the above, which is Advance UK.
That's a brilliant answer. Thank you very much, Ben. And I hope to have a few more chats in the future. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
I would also say that, brand and marketing are incredibly important. And once again, I will go back to the days of Ben being in Reform. And I was very pleased to see him joining Reform, simply because he was in a senior position, and I really wanted him to make those kind of changes, which he did to an extent. But it was the structure, and I think Ben will confirm this, that the reason that he left was simply because, once again, this autocratic top-down policy where he was banned from talking to the grassroots members. I mean, that's no way to run a party. That's no way to be in government. And I think you're making a great point there. So I do think that branding and marketing and getting that message out to people is incredibly important. And I suspect, having seen and been involved now with this space and how successful it's been, that we will probably want to do this on a much more regular basis. I've really enjoyed hearing from the people. And that's the whole thesis of Advance UK. We want to involve everybody in this process rather than just dictate to people.
I hope you do. Thank you as well for your answer. But don't forget, there are a lot of people who are not on Twitter, and they will need to be reached as well. I guess that was one of my other points in regards to my question.
Just on that point, if I may interject, we have had so many people approach Advance UK asking to volunteer. some of them have been quite a nuisance in a really fantastic way, literally calling, emailing, tweeting, everything they possibly can. And they are asking, can we go out on the streets and leaflet drop? Can we call people? Can we spread your message? And it's been quite overwhelming. And I think that will just grow with the momentum of the party. And we have been so grateful for that as well. So that reaction tells me there is something really starting to seep into the psyche of those people that normally vote for none of the above.
Indeed.
But thank you so much.
Thank you very much as well. Thank you. Good evening.
You're very kind. Thank you. AI Velma, I think you have literally been waiting all evening to get your questions. So thank you for your patience.
No, you're welcome. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would just like to know a little bit more about your thoughts and strategy for tech and cyber, particularly in the consumer sort of world. I think we have a lot of problems currently with our infrastructure, with spyware, and I haven't seen either the Labour government talk, we hear about ransomware and data breaches, but there's a whole load of stuff going on, particularly with infrastructure. I'm sure we're all aware we've got very old power grids. How are we going to support AI moving forward? We also have massive problems in our telecommunication systems. They badly need upgrading. So I was wondering how you're sort of planning to persuade some of these big companies to get on board with security, because I'm petrified at this current juncture. I'm sort of migrating from cybersecurity more into the AI world, but when I look at the state of our systems, I mean, the internet is just a burning fire of hell. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be so dramatic, but there's some real problems, particularly with spyware as well. Israeli spyware is a massive problem in the UK right now, and nobody wants to talk about it. The government don't seem to want to address it. I remember when the Conservatives were in, I can't remember who it was now. Somebody's phone got attacked by Russian hackers and had a load of spyware installed, and they all just brush it under the carpet. And I just feel that we need to take a stronger stance on that. We talk a lot about developing our military, etc., but the cyber is where it's all hanging out, as well for the future. So I'd just like to know a little bit more about your thoughts about that, if that's okay.
Oh, I have to admit, I'm not a techie, but I mean, the way I see the whole approach to technology is basically the same approach that we've had to so many other things that are critical for the protection of the country. And my mind goes back to early 2020, I think, when we had the Brexit Party, in our sort of dying days as a party, mounted a campaign against Huawei being granted the contract for 5G. Do you remember Boris Johnson was going to hand it over to Huawei? And we were all kind of thinking, why would you do that to a Chinese power? And Theresa May wanted the Chinese to build our next nuclear power station. And even now we're buying BYD Chinese, electric cars. And we're not really thinking straight in the pursuit of cheap, easy solutions, quick fixes. We're not prepared to think about what's important for the national security and this, I think, goes hand in hand with forgetting the importance of being a nation state and what it means to be a nation state. If you get hijacked by by this global narrative that everything's fine on the global stage, the Chinese are fine, get them into all your infrastructure and everything else, then you're not going to be looking out for malware and software breaches and the protection of our systems. And so I think that's the root of the problem, and we need to reconnect um, with the desire to protect ourselves. But then I think there is another massive gap, Velma, which is what you're pointing to, which is a complete knowledge gap. We've lost so many skills in the UK. We used to be so capable across so many different fields. And again, I think it is through mass migration, eye off the ball, playing to this kind of woke culture, focusing on DEI when we should be focusing, as Jim said, on meritocracy, putting our profit motive first for organized for businesses and so on. All of that being set aside has taken our eye completely off the ball, to the point where now we can't even protect the RAF planes from being painted on by Palestinian action. It's a complete breakdown in the country. And so I think the software issue is a very pertinent and important one, and part of a much bigger issue which has caused problems right across the country.
Maybe just to add to that, we are part of the Five Eyes Alliance. National security is incredibly important. And I think, once again, we want to see, Ben alluded to this earlier on with the EU Defence Union, we want to be in charge of our own military, our own SIS, Secret Intelligence Services, MI5, MI6, GCHQ, and our police, all of which are being coveted by the European Union. And the other thing I would interject, Velma, I think it's good points that you've made, because central bank digital currencies, digital ID are all on the cards, and that's something that is causing a lot of us very serious concern. So we want to have a robust national defence, we want to have good national security, but at the same time, we want to protect our citizens, and Advance UK will be taking that on board and moving that forward as far as policy is concerned. So I would say watch this space, but great questions. Thank you.
Yeah, it is the consumer land that particularly worries me at this current juncture, because we do have some, very stealthy organisations that do a very good job, and I'm not trying to denounce that at all. But I'm just, there is a very big focus, obviously, only on enterprise. But I work with currently a lot of consumers, and the things that I'm seeing at the moment, there's a few things that I can't talk about, but it's petrifying, and it's affecting every citizen in the UK, and people don't know anything about it. And we've got GDPR, and we've got the IOC, and they're always fining, Meta and whoever else, these massive fines. But where does that money go? None of that money goes back to the people that have been harmed. And I'm sure you're aware there's a lot of people that are being harmed through all types of cybercrime. But I don't think people really understand technology, as you said, and we need to do better in educating people, so that, and also possibly legislation around the manufacturing of new goods. We, like you said, the importation coming from China, we don't know what we're buying in terms of how easy that is to breach. A consumer does not understand, that when they collect their Bluetooth speaker, that Bluetooth speaker is going to be hacked within 2 minutes and it's going to be part of a botnet. That's a fact, so we do need to do more for people. It's a very boring subject. People roll their eyes at me a lot, I do understand that too, but we need to
Well,
find
it's
innovation about
technical.
that.
It's technical, and I think joining the
Yes.
dots becomes difficult, but it's crucial. You're absolutely right. It's very difficult for me, by the way. I find it difficult because it's technology, and I'm 60 years old, so it's an issue.
Yeah, I do understand, but thank you. That's good to hear. Anyway, I just wanted to make sure it was at the forefront of what you're thinking about too. So, because it's important for people, small business. They're getting hit hard.
I think that was a really, really brilliant question, and something we need to think a lot more about. It was only about 5 or 6 years ago that this country was attracting, at one point within our technology, nearly as much foreign direct investment as the USA. And we no longer train anybody. We do nothing. We outsource absolutely everything in this country, and it's left us in the most dire situation. So I think there are many areas that we do have to look at. So, gentlemen, we are down to our last two inquisitors of the evening. Shankil, hello, how are you? And you are up next. What is your question?
Evening, YC. Evening, Jim, Ben, and the rest of the guests and listeners. Ben, it is an absolute privilege actually getting to speak to you. I'm a huge admirer, have been for a long time, way before any of the nonsense was starting to start in reform. I just liked your position on the United Kingdom of Great Britain, and as you always say, and Northern Ireland. You never forget about my wee country. My question is, would Advance UK stand candidates here in Northern Ireland? I know it's a very volatile political place, and most other people sort of shy away from it. All other sort of political parties just let us get on with what we're getting on with. If you don't, who would you think would be like the people that sit, say, on the opposition side, who would be good people for me to vote for, to get my voice heard in an approach that Advance UK would take?
Well, thank you, Shankle. I mean, I absolutely adore Northern Ireland. And I mean, I only ended up in Northern Ireland in the pursuit of protecting the United Kingdom because I could see the Northern Ireland Protocol attack the entire kingdom. But in my time fighting that, I've become very close to the Northern Irish people, who are the proudest unionists, some of them actually Ulster nationalists, if truth be told, but, many, many very, very strong unionists. And so, as far as domestic politics in Northern Ireland is concerned, you do have to register separately as a political party to be able to stand there. And um, I was very keen to avoid getting involved in domestic Northern Irish party politics because I was hoping in my time campaigning that I could support the DUP, the TUV, the UUP, all coming together to protect the union. But it turned out, as I'd been warned by so many people, that the DUP would eventually do the dirty on the Windsor framework, and inevitably they did the dirty. And the one individual, the one party that speaks sense repeatedly, and you may not agree with all their policies, but they are superb people, and I love the leader, a guy called Jim Allister, who is leader of the traditional unionist voice. And when I was deputy leader of Reform, we established an alliance with the TUV because of the sound policies on the union, and that alliance actually had the ability for Reform to stand candidates in Northern Ireland with the in agreement with the TUV, in alliance with them. So if you recall back to the general election in 2024, the TUV stood candidates under a joint banner, which, by the way, I can reveal now, really irritated Farage. I had Farage on the phone to me saying, "Who the hell sanctioned this?" And I said, "Well, it was well flagged and well documented. Look back at what happened over the last 6 months before you appointed yourself leader." And so I think when it comes to Northern Irish politics, I would naturally seek to do something with Jim, have an alliance of a similar nature where we can stand in Northern Ireland with him, with his blessing. But before I finish on that, I just want to say it's absolutely crucial, critically crucial for the union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland that we have politics across the union. It's an absurdity to me that we have these kind of parties that only stand in Northern Ireland, only stand in Scotland. It's divisive. We need links across the United Kingdom, and the Tories, the Conservative and Unionist Party. What they've got representation in Ireland, Northern Ireland. They make absolutely no attempt to do anything serious in Northern Ireland, and again, I can see aliens on the call, and Shankil, I'm sure you've got a view on it. But we will be very much, part of the. If we're not standing candidates there, we will nevertheless be very much part of the political fabric of Northern Ireland. Absolutely, 100%.
Thank you so much, Ben. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you so much, Shankil. Lovely to see you. And our final question this evening will come from Stephen Rennie. Are you ready to go?
Hello, yeah, thank you. My question to Ben is, I'm a normal working class voter from up in Scotland, and just now the solution to the Labour problem is, the solution to the Labour and the Tory problem is reform. If we've got all these parties from the right competing against each other for votes, then how are we going to stop Labour from getting in again at the next general election?
So I think YC in her opening remarks addressed this extremely well. I don't know, YC, whether you'd like to say what you said again because you said it so eloquently, or whether you'd like me to have a crack at the answer.
Well, I'll have a little crack at
Yeah.
it and then I'll let you continue. But at the moment, this country's favourite party currently is one called None of the Above. Every single poll that has been conducted in this country in the last couple of years, people are voting more or would rather vote for none of the above. They do not like the majority of the political parties. And if you look at the turnout in our last election, only 52% of adults went out and voted. There are a vast number of disenfranchised, politically lost, not trusting. And I think, I was somebody that jumped onto the Reform Party. I felt it was the answer, the uni party. What's happened in this country for the last 30 years, just absolutely and utterly, it was just gutting me looking at what was happening in literally every corner of our country. And although my accent would tell you otherwise, I was actually born in the beautiful area of Belfast in Northern Ireland, and I just felt that we also just threw the country of my birth away as well. So we have to go out. I think Richard Tice called them you lot. We have to go out and find those people that are not going out and voting. We're not splitting anything at the moment. If those people just found something they could believe in, a party, a movement, whatever it is, just something that re-engages them, makes them believe and speaks their language. And there are millions of those people out there. We just need to go and be able to find them, speak to them in their language and deliver what they need. And I think this space this evening, and it's been nearly 3 hours and it has for me flown by, maybe not so much for Ben and Jim, but so many questions just answered honestly and to the point. And even if you don't like the answer is there and it's very, very clear and it's consistent. So that would be it for me. But Ben and Jim, I think you are far more qualified than I am to answer that question.
No, I think that was spot on. The only thing I would just quickly add to that is there's no such thing as right wing. This notion that we're splitting the right wing vote is a convenient label to try and put Reform Conservatives and ourselves in the same bracket. But actually, the Conservative Party is not right wing. And the split in politics is not between left and right. The split is between those who wish to govern through the supranational order, international law, ruling, trumping domestic law, quangos and bureaucrats running our system rather than elected representatives of the people. They're one side of the debate. The other side of the debate are those of us who believe in democracy, freedom of speech, equality in front of the law, and Parliament being responsible for the governance of this country. And there are very, very few people, if any, on that side of the debate. Reform isn't even on that side of the debate. They might like you to think that they carry, the Union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and democracy in their hearts, but they don't. Neither Farage is on the record saying United Ireland is inevitable. Farage is on the record saying that he stands against the sort of intervention of the state and policies and the governance of our lives, but then he's pro-state intervention when it comes to child benefits and the redistribution of wealth from rich people to poor people. He's all over the place. So it's not a matter of left versus right or splitting the right wing vote. It's a matter of identifying a unified political philosophy that's going to deliver for the nation state of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And I would say there's no one. Actually, there's no political party, with perhaps the exception, I have to say, and Aileen put me right on this earlier today. I've mentioned Aileen a few times. She's very quiet. She hasn't said anything. Perhaps she can do some gesticulation with an emoji. But she said to me, the SDP, Ben, don't forget the SDP. They are good, and they are good. William Clouston and the SDP are very solid on these issues too. And I do have to take credit, I have to give credit where credit is due. Thank you very much, everyone. That's probably enough from me. So, Jim, I'll let you finish, but I'll say goodbye, everyone. And thank you, YC, for hosting this. And thank you very, very much, everyone, for coming on and listening. Over to you, Jim.
Well, great points. Just in the previous speaker, it was wonderful to hear another Scottish voice. I'm a Scottish Highlander, but it's always good to hear people from Scotland. There's been a few speakers up tonight from Scotland, and Scotland is an important part of the United Kingdom, so I'm listening very, very carefully to what you're all saying. This space has flown past. It doesn't feel like 3 hours. It feels like 20 minutes. And there's so much more that we could have talked about. A couple of things I will say, especially on the law and order side of things and zero tolerance, for example, no bail for repeat violent offenders, instant arrests for eco-extremists and protest mobs and riot agitators. It's time we got law and order back in. Foreign criminals, as Ben has said earlier on, automatically deported after serving time. Because when there's no justice, there's no peace, and we will bring back both. What makes Advance UK different? Unlike Reform, Advance UK isn't a protest brand or a personality project. We're building a true party of the people from the ground up, with a founding member college system that lets the people shape our direction, and that is unique to Advance UK. With leader Ben Habib, who's agreed to put up £100,000 of his own money when we hit the target, or perhaps before that, as we may well do, and with clear, bold, actionable policy, not recycled slogans or vague promises. Look, folks, the time is now. If you still believe in Britain, if you refuse to let globalists dictate your future, if you want housing, freedom, justice, and dignity restored, then become a founding member today. We're already a top 10 party by membership. Momentum is on our side, but we need you. Together, we can do what others only promise: advance the nation, defend the people, and restore the United Kingdom back to what it should be. And on that note, I would just like to say how proud I am to have been here in this space. Thank you, Advance UK, for having me as a speaker. Thank you, Ben, for your words of wisdom and your vision. And on that note, I will say goodbye to each and every one of you. Keep following, keep listening, because this is just the start of something truly tremendous. We're going to get our country back. Thank you, one and all, and good night.